The life of a ninja beginning in the Hidden Mist Village. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451 Revelation. In fact, Obito's right eye's time and space ability can be summarized into only one type, absorption. However, the absorption ability is further divided into external absorption and internal absorption. External absorption is very simple, that is, to apply the absorption effect to other things other than oneself, and absorb them into the different space. The so-called internal absorption is to apply the absorption effect to oneself, absorb one's body into the different space, so as to achieve the effect of virtualizing the body in the real world, and avoid any attack. However, these two absorption abilities cannot be used at the same time, so when absorbing externally, Obito will reveal the flaws of his entity. Now, he does not have the flying ability like Qishuang, and cannot fly. Once the virtualization effect of the right eye is removed, he will immediately be stuck to the ground by the dissolving mucus all over the ground, and cannot get away, and finally turn into a pool of pus. In other words, although he can move freely in this mucus field with his virtualization ability, he cannot reveal his entity, and cause substantial attacks on the two. I have to think of a way to avoid these mucus. Obito thought silently. His ability to become a hollow cannot be maintained indefinitely, but has a fixed time limit of about 5 minutes. It's just that in normal times, he sometimes reveals his physical body, and sometimes enters the hollow state. On the one hand, he can attack the opponent unexpectedly, and on the other hand, he can use this to cover and achieve the purpose of resting his ability. Therefore, no one knows that his ability to become a hollow has a fixed time limit. Now, if he can't solve the dilemma of not being able to land before the time limit of his ability to become a hollow is reached, it will be a bit troublesome. At the same time, seeing that he stopped moving, Qishuang and the others were not polite. Terumi Mei quickly formed a seal and injected chakra into the mucus under his feet, controlling the mucus to surge like a spring. Dissolution release. Sticky dragon technique. The top of the milky white spring turned into the shape of a dragon head, and then it opened its mouth wide like a giant dragon that had just emerged from the mucus and was covered with mucus, and pounced on Uchiha Obito on the other side. Unfortunately, Obito's ability to become a hollow was not lifted, and the giant slime dragon passed through his body and hit the flame barrier heavily, turning into a pool of mud. The part of the slime that touched the flame barrier was directly burned into charcoal. On the other side, Qishuang took a lot of effort to pull his feet out of the slime, and then used ice escape to create ice cubes under his feet to stand on, and then he stood steadily on the slime field. Although the chakra coat protected him, the slime could not hurt him, but the slime was extremely sticky, and his feet were stuck in it, and could not move at all. Therefore, he came up with the idea of creating ice cubes under his feet to avoid the trouble caused by the strong stickiness of the slime. In other words, his ice escape attainments were high enough so that the ice cubes could stay on the highly corrosive slime for a short time and would not be corroded and dissolved immediately. If another ice escape ninja used this method, he would not be able to gain a foothold in this slime field. The result can only be ice melting and death. Then, he was like ice with every step, and he was as fast as the wind, quickly passing through the mucus field and rushing towards Uchiha Obito. On the opposite side, Uchiha Obito, who was trying to find a solution, was very surprised because Nana Frost did not use her flying ability to avoid the strong viscosity of the mucus as he thought, but was moving very fast in this mucus field. What's going on? He concentrated the power of the Sharingan and looked over, hoping to discover the secret through the dynamic vision of the Sharingan. Then, under the slow motion effect of the dynamic vision, he clearly saw that at the moment Nana Frost landed, a layer of ice formed between the soul of her shoe and the mucus, separating the two and avoiding the trouble caused by the strong viscosity of the mucus. So that's how it is. He couldn't help but nod, and then looked at Nana Frost and mocked, "Thank you for your reminder." He quickly formed a set of hand seals and gathered chakra to his right arm, and immediately saw that his right arm turned into a cluster of yellow-brown vines. would release Hell's chaos. Then, he aimed the vine on his right arm at the ground, like a willow branch sprouting, as if he had used up a year's growth in an instant. Then, at the moment the vine touched the ground, he released his ability to become a virtual being that was about to reach its time limit. Because, in the virtual state, his ninjutsu attacks could not interfere with reality and would only remain in his different space. Boom. The moment he revealed his entity, the vine penetrated the mucus layer and hit the ground, and took advantage of the situation to push him up into the air. Then, the vine grew rapidly under the stimulation of his large amount of chakra, and a large number of new branches were spreading in all directions both on the ground and underground. Nanashi, who was chasing him, saw him suddenly rise into the air, and there were vines growing continuously to block his way, so he had to stop chasing, and rushed to the side of Terumi Mei, waving his ice spear to block the wanton expansion of the vines. After all, Mei didn't have the same defensive ability as him. If she was accidentally entangled by these vines, it would be all over. As for the dissolving mucus on the ground, although it had a certain destructive effect on the vines, the corrosion rate of dissolving mucus was far less than the growth rate of the vines, and it was impossible to curb the expansion of the vines. The space of the barrier was not large, and it was covered by a thorny forest in just a moment. At the same time, Obito, who was suspended in the air by the vines, also untied the vines on his right arm and landed on the thorny forest again. Inspired by Nanami's creation of ice cubes to step on, he used the wood escape technique to create a thorny forest to step on himself, thus getting rid of the threat of the mucus field on the ground. Then, he grabbed a wooden thorn that slipped down from his right sleeve, used the thorns on the ground as a springboard, and rushed straight towards Nanami and the others. Seeing this, Nanami also rushed up the thorns and met them with an ice spear. At this moment, the vine stopped expanding, and he didn't need to stay by Ming's side to guard. Boom. The ice spear collided with the wooden thorns, making a dull sound. The two refused to give in, and pressed against each other. However, because her whole body was covered with ice chakra, any enemy who dared to come into contact with Qishuang would be frozen into an ice cube. In just a moment, a layer of ice crystal spread along the wooden thorns that Obito used to hit the ice spear and spread to the end of the handle. Seeing this, Obito's pupils shrank, and he quickly let go and stepped back. At the moment of retreating, he gathered his pupil power and looked at Qishuang's eyes. Sharingan illusion, because he didn't understand why the Sharingan illusion failed during the last fight. Obito reluctantly used it again this time. If it succeeds, it will be a good thing. If it fails, he can also use the Sharingan to explore the secret. However, he didn't have much hope that the illusion would be successful. Then, his premonition became true. At the moment he released the illusion, Qishuang's right eye lit up with a strange blue glow again. His movements paused for a moment, and then he continued to pursue without hesitation. I could hear his disdainful voice. I told you, your illusion has no meaning to me. Chapter 452 Appearance. After removing the freezing effect and throwing off the wooden thorns on the ice spear, Qishuang stabbed Obito with a spear. However, Uchiha Obito had already prepared for the illusion to fail. At the moment when the illusion failed, he quickly switched to the ability of his right eye to become virtual and avoided the stab of the ice spear. Qishuang was unable to stop the ice spear because it stabbed into the air, so she immediately passed through Obito's body along the ice spear. What exactly caused the illusion to fail? Turning around, Obito looked at the back emitting a pale white light and was confused. When he cast the illusion, Qishuang's right eye emitted a strange blue light, and an inexplicable force disrupted his rhythm of controlling the opponent's chakra. Obviously, the strange blue light must be related to the power that disturbed his illusion. However, even if he used the Sharingan and exerted his pupil power to the extreme, he still couldn't see anything from the blue eye. The blue light seemed to appear out of thin air, and there was no chakra change at all. As far as he knew, chakra was the source of everything. No matter what secret eye technique, chakra was needed to drive it. If he could not see the change of chakra, it meant that the other part his eye was not produced by chakra. However, chakra was the source of all power. If it was not chakra, then what was it? He racked his brains, but could not figure it out. This was completely beyond his understanding. At the same time, Meditarumi on the ground injected chakra into the mucus under her feet and launched an offensive again. Earth-style, flowing rock missile. After converting chakra into the nature of soil, she had the ability to control the land. The ground began to shake violently, and then it collapsed in an instant. Countless gravel sprayed out from the ground, carrying milky white mucus into the sky, covering both Obito and Nanoshima in the attack range of the technique. Unfortunately, neither Nanoshima nor Obito was hurt at all. The blue-skirted beauty could not help but feel angry. With the ice spear stuck on the vine, Qishuang turned around with the force, and once again attacked Obito under the rain of stones covered with the slime of the dissolving escape technique. However, Obito, who had no way to deal with him, did not want to waste his energy on him, and immediately used his ability to sink into the thorn branches under his feet. Seeing this, Qishuang immediately guessed what he was thinking, and rushed to Meditarumi on the ground, and shouted to remind her, "Ming, he is coming, be careful." As he said that, he threw away the ice spear in his hand, quickly flipped his fingers, and gathered chakra in his mouth ready to go. In this environment without ice, his movement speed was far slower than Obito's. Just in case, it was safer to prepare a ninjutsu. Not long after he warned, a one-eyed mask quietly emerged from a thorn branch behind Meditarumi and stretched out a hand with a black glove to her. However, they were too close. It was fine. When Obito was in a hollow state, his aura was completely hidden in the space, and there was no way to detect it. But when he materialized, his aura could no longer be concealed. Because of Nanoshi's reminder, Terumi Medi was in a tense state, so she was noticed the moment Obito materialized, and made a corresponding defense plan. Dissolution release. Mud dissolution array wall. She stomped her foot lightly, and a large amount of mucus immediately surged from the ground behind her, turning into a sticky milky white barrier. It seemed that she didn't expect her reaction to be so quick. Before Obito behind her could react, the hand that was stretched out was immediately embedded in the milky white mucus wall. Terumi Medi turned back at the moment of releasing the technique, preparing to attack again, but before she could make another move, the one-eyed mask that was stuck in the mucus wall exploded into smoke and dust with a bang. Clone. She was surprised. At this time, another one-eyed mask emerged from the thorny branches not far behind her, and a vortex of emptiness slowly opened on the right eye socket. Meditarumi was startled when she noticed the abnormal fluctuations behind her. Obviously, it must be Uchiha Obito. Unfortunately, the opponent's timing was too accurate. She had just turned around and jumped, and she hadn't landed yet. She had no time to turn around temporarily, and couldn't avoid this round of attacks. At this time, Nanoshima, who was running from a distance, saw Obito appear, and immediately released the technique that had been accumulated for a long time. Water style, water wave. He opened his mouth and spit out a light blue high pressure water column, aiming directly at Uchiha Obito. If she insisted on attacking Mei, she would definitely be hit by his high pressure water column and be caught off guard by the subsequent ice style attack. If she wanted to avoid his subsequent attack, she would have to give up the plan to attack Mei. Seeing that his fingers were about to touch the blue skirted beauty, but another high pressure water column attacked from the other side, Obito couldn't help but frown secretly. After estimating the time, he found that if he was a beat slower, he would be hit by the high pressure water column first, and he would not be able to absorb Meditarumi into the different space before being hit. In addition, he had seen the scene where Nanami condensed water into ice to deal with Scorpion, and Obito did not want to suffer that unprovoked crime, so he had to give up the plan to absorb Meditarumi, and instead use the absorption on himself, entering the hollow state. Wow. The rapids were surging, and Obito avoided it by hollowing, but Meditarumi was not so lucky. When she passed through Obito's hollow figure, Nanami's high pressure water flow also arrived in front of her, and immediately washed her solid. Fortunately, she also knew that Nanami was attacking the enemy and saving him, and did not intend to affect her, so she did not lose her temper, nor did she lose her temper, and took advantage of the water pressure to land steadily on another thorn branch. At the same time, seeing that Mei was out of danger, Nanami immediately stopped the technique and attacked Obito, who was right in front of her again. Unfortunately, Obito ignored all attacks, by relying on his hollow state and didn't even look at him, allowing him to punch through his body and once again rushed to the other side of Terumi Mei. At this moment, Nana Frost was like a hedgehog with thorns. He had nowhere to bite, but as long as he took down Terumi Mei, he would be like pinching Nana Frost's throat. At that time, it would be much easier to get Backland's body. Seeing that he completely ignored her and only attacked Mei, Nana Frost couldn't help but secretly get anxious. As the saying goes, long defense leads to loss. Mei can dodge the first time, but can't dodge the second time, the third time. He must attract Uchihirobito's attention to himself. Helplessly, he had to chase, while taking out a scroll from his pocket and quickly forming a set of hand seals. Release. With the rise of white smoke, a thin figure appeared in the dust. At the same time, seeing Uchihirobito staring at her closely, Terumi Mei also understood the other party's thoughts and immediately approached Nana Frost's position quickly. With Nana Frost looking after each other, it would definitely be safer than dealing with it alone. However, Uchihirobito used his right eye to move through time and space and was faster than her. He caught up with her in an instant. Just as Obito was about to absorb Mei, Terumi into the different space of his right eye again, a familiar and frightening voice came from not far behind him. Where is this place? Chapter 453 Fear of Change. Under the mask, Uchihirobito, with a face full of surprise, could not help but stop. Because that female voice was exactly the same as the voice that haunted him in his memory. At this moment, it awakened the dusty memories in his heart. Obito, why are you late again? Obito, how could you be so careless and get hurt again? Obito, I will definitely heal all the pain in you and Kakashi. Obito, Rin. He turned around slowly and mechanically and then saw a girl with short brown hair and purple stripes on her face. At this moment, he couldn't help but widen his eyes, and his heart was like being pressed by a huge rock and was about to stop beating. Why? How is it possible? Why is Lin here? Obito was immediately panicked. The little girl in front of him was exactly the same as Nohara Rin, who had died many years ago. But no matter what, Obito was unwilling to believe that she was the Nohara Rin he had been thinking about. Who are you? Why do you know my name? Hearing his words, the girl tilted her head slightly, looked at him in surprise, and said to herself, I don't know why, I always feel that you look familiar. Hearing this, Uchihirobito instinctively raised his hand to cover his face and retreated in fear. No, no, no. Please, please, don't look at me. Although he was still wearing a thick one-eyed mask on his face, under the girl's puzzled eyes, he still felt that his disguise was not safe at all, for fear that she would see his true face. Because he had subconsciously regarded her as the real Nohara Rin. However, after searching hard and fruitlessly, he suddenly met her again in this environment, but he found that he could not face the girl he once liked again. He didn't know what kind of face he should show to Nohara Rin. Rin was still as kind and lovely as she was back then, but he was no longer the simple and passionate boy back then. Even at this moment, he suddenly realized that he didn't even recognize himself now. Especially after he indirectly killed his mentor, he had no face to see this beloved girl. Because his mentor was also the teacher that Nohara Rin respected the most. At this moment, his persistence over the years began to waver after Nohara Rin appeared. Outside the barrier, Zetsu, who sneaked into the battlefield quietly, frowned secretly after seeing this scene through the flame barrier. Things are a bit troublesome. Black Zetsu sighed helplessly. Obito's right eye has the ability to become a hollow, so there is no need to worry about his safety, right? The white half said in surprise. Even he could see that the battle situation was not very favorable for Uchihirobito, but there should be no problem in protecting himself. Black stared at the inside tightly and said solemnly, I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about another thing. Ah. White Zetsu was confused. Black Zetsu murmured, back then, we used that girl to make Obito fall into despair, which made him willing to cooperate with us. But now that the girl has reappeared in the world, I'm afraid Obito's faith will be shaken. You mean, Obito is likely to betray us for that girl? White Zetsu was surprised. It's very likely. Black Zetsu said in a heavy tone, he is too obsessed with that girl. If it was someone else, this might not be possible, but Obito's ultimate goal is to create a new world and meet that girl again. Now, he is very close to this goal. Why should he continue to follow the path that person has set? Hearing this, White Zetsu couldn't help but think, Uchiha Obito is still a selfish person after all. He will not carry out their plan for some illusory ideal. He just took the opportunity to implement the plan to achieve his goal of meeting Nohara. In this regard, Obito and another person in the organization have different priorities. The other person in the organization is a loyal believer who is truly determined to carry out their plan for the great ideal and will not make principled mistakes for personal gain. Now that the goal is within reach, it is very likely that Uchiha Obito will terminate the plan and betray them again. Then, Black Zetsu said to his white half, notify the person in the base that the situation has changed. After the Kirigakure matter is settled, be careful of Uchiha Obito betraying the organization. From what you said, are you going to replace his person? White Zetsu said in confusion. Black Zetsu said solemnly, the one in the base was his real person. Uchiha Obito was just a surprise he picked up temporarily. He was another insurance for future plans, so he chose Uchiha Obito. The two are one bright and one dark, ensuring the smooth implementation of the plan. Now, Uchiha Obito's insurance may fail, so of course I have to help him change his person. Okay, I'll contact that side right away. White Zetsu responded, and then contacted the nearest clone through telepathy, telling Black Zetsu's request one by one. Then, the White Zetsu clones hidden underground, one after another, like a baton race, immediately passed on Black Zetsu's information. At this moment, a cold voice came from the thick fog behind him. Why are you two cowards here? Zetsu turned his head and saw that it was Kakuzu who came with 4 clones. Don't you two never participate in battles? Why did you sneak here? Kakuzu mocked without any hesitation. As a veteran in the organization, he knew very well that this black and white weird companion in front of him was responsible for the intelligence liaison affairs of the organization and was not good at fighting. Therefore, every time they went on a mission, these two guys hid aside to record and rarely showed up, giving people a very cowardly feeling. White Zetsu replied nonchalantly, of course we came here to watch the show. It's a pity that you came too late. The guy named Zabuza and his friends have been killed by Obito. Kakuzu waved his hand nonchalantly, not surprised at all by this result. Because Uchiha Obito's ability to appear and disappear is too terrifying. If he concentrates on sneak attacks, there are really not many people who can stop him. Then, he asked Beizetsu, have you seen the man and woman? I searched around the battlefield, but I couldn't find any trace of them. It was too weird to only hear their voices, but not see them. Beizetsu looked at him with interest, pointed at the fire barrier next to him, and teased, look, what else is inside this barrier? Hearing this, Kakuzu subconsciously walked closer and found that there were 2 familiar figures in the barrier that shouldn't be there. Chapter 454, Dirty Land. How did those 2 guys get into the barrier? Kakuzu was confused after recognizing the 2 people who were confronting Obito in the barrier. He searched around the battlefield, but ignored the inside of the barrier. Unfortunately, the fog was thick and his vision was extremely limited. Every time he searched, he just glanced at the vicinity of the barrier and confirmed that there was no movement outside the barrier before moving to the next place. He did not deliberately approach to observe the situation inside. Therefore, he had no idea what was going on inside the barrier. Just now, he heard the 2 people's exclamations and followed the sound to approach the barrier. If he hadn't met White Zetsu, he would have ignored the inside of the barrier again after he couldn't find anyone outside the barrier. I saw them falling from the sky and entering the barrier. I guess they must have flown into the sky and entered from the upper entrance. Black Zetsu looked up along the barrier of the fire barrier and muttered, that guy can fly? That's really a bit tricky. Kakuzu couldn't help but frown secretly. It doesn't matter if the defense is strong, as long as the opponent's chakra is slowly worn away, they can always win in a longer time. However, if the opponent has the ability to fly, once he sees the situation is not good and flies away, they will be helpless. Yeah, that guy is getting more and more difficult. Black Zetsu also sighed. An extremely powerful and well-informed guy made him feel more and more in danger. He originally thought that it was just a slightly stronger ice ninja, but when the opponent revealed Uchiha Obito's identity and accurately grasped Scorpion's flaws, everything was different. That person knew too much, so much that he was a little scared. What do you two think? Kakuzu pointed at the barrier and said to Zetsu, should I tear down the barrier and go in? Or should I wait for Obito to untie it and let them out? Tear it down. White Zetsu looked at him with amusement and said, if you think you can tear it down, you can give it a try. I don't think Obito will think you are meddling. Seeing that he was looking down on him, Kakuzu snorted coldly, clenched his fist, then added the earth spear to his right arm and suddenly punched the barrier. Boom. The barrier didn't move at all, but Kakuzu's dark brown fist turned red, like a burning charcoal, bright red. Hiss. After removing his fist, Kakuzu took a breath of cold air. The amazing heat from the barrier instantly burned his fist red. Fortunately, he had the power of the earth spear to protect him, otherwise his right arm would have been roasted. Even now, when his fist left the barrier, he still did not dare to interrupt the blessing of the earth spear on his right arm, because the heat on his right arm had not dissipated yet. At this moment, the heartless laughter of White Zetsu came from the side. How is it? This barrier is not so easy to dismantle, right? Knowing that he had a flawed personality, Kakuzu was too lazy to argue with him, so he could only snort coldly and wait patiently for the heat on his right arm to dissipate, and for Uchiha Obito's next move. In the barrier, Obito did not dare to face the brown-haired girl's gaze and retreated repeatedly, muttering, please, don't look at me, don't look at me. And Meitarumi also got a chance to breathe and quietly joined Nana Frost. Isn't this little girl the Three Tails Jinchuriki back then? How did she appear here? And, I remember that she had died many years ago. And why did she come out of your ceiling scroll? Meitarumi asked a long list of questions like a string of cannonballs. The appearance of Nohara-rin surprised not only Uchiha Obito, but also her and Zetsu outside. It was too unexpected. After being surprised, a bunch of questions followed. It would be fine if the dead were resurrected, but they actually came out of the ceiling scroll. You know, although the ceiling scroll is convenient for storage, it has a fatal flaw: it cannot seal living things. To seal living things, special sealing ninja tools are needed. She couldn't imagine how Nana Frost could seal a living person into the scroll, because just as Nana Frost was about to explain, the brown-haired girl took out a kunai and rushed straight towards them. You bunch of hateful Kirigakure ninjas, die. Obito saw it and instinctively shouted loudly, Rin, don't. However, because he was afraid of facing Nohara-rin, he retreated again and again, widening the distance between the two sides. At this time, it was too late to stop Rin's reckless behavior. Looking for death, Meitarumi, who had no good impression of Konoha ninjas, saw Nohara-rin using force and immediately formed a seal and puffed up her mouth, preparing to cast a spell to deal with her. Wait. Qishuang hurriedly stopped her and made another hand seal and said, don't be nervous, her actions are all under my control, there will be no danger. Stop. Then, he used chakra induction to immediately contact the talisman buried deep in Nohara-rin's body and used it to control Nohara-rin's actions, making her stop motionlessly in front of the two of them. As early as when he was practicing in the Ryochi cave, Qishuang had studied the immortality reincarnation given to him by Orochimaru. Just as he gave Orochimaru a fragmentary momentary beauty, Orochimaru also gave him a fragmentary immortality reincarnation technique. Overall, there is no problem, but if you study it carefully, you will find that there is a lot of missing information in many key places of the technique. It can only be used for reference and research, and cannot be used for direct practice. Although he didn't expect to learn Orochimaru's immortal reincarnation, he was still a little depressed and disappointed after confirming that the technique was incomplete. Or maybe he wasn't worried that he could learn immortal reincarnation. Although Orochimaru had tampered with the main part of the technique, the other branches and details were very complete. This method of using talismans to control the impure world reincarnation was one of them. In order to better control Nohara-rin, Nana Frost learned this method when she was practicing in the Ryochi cave and buried the talisman into the opponent's body. The reason why Nohara-rin attacked them as soon as she came up was the result of his experiment in the Ryochi cave. Seeing that the little girl stopped moving like a machine, Terumi asked in surprise, while retracting her chakra, "How did you do it? Did you use an illusion?" "It's not an illusion." Nana Frost shook her head while paying attention to Obito's movements. She pinched the seal and said, "That is a special method to control the actions of the dead." The dead? A big question mark rose in Terumi's heart. At the same time, Uchiha Obito and the others were startled and immediately thought of something. "How can you perform Orochimaru's immortal reincarnation?" Obito asked loudly in disbelief. As far as he knew, in addition to the reincarnation that the man gave him, only Orochimaru's immortal reincarnation could revive the dead and reappear in the world. It was at this moment that he realized that Lin was the dead created by the immortal reincarnation, and he finally understood what Nana Frost had said earlier, that Lin's soul and body were all in his hands. Because immortal reincarnation is a technique that can play with the souls of the dead. Chapter 455, Revealed. "Have you seen Konoha's Orochimaru?" Terumi asked Nanashi in surprise. "Ahem. I saw him once a long time ago." Nanashi nodded and replied ambiguously, not wanting to go into too much detail. In order to divert Ming's attention, he said to the girl who was glaring at him, "Konoha's ninja, little Nohara-rin, do you know why I let you out?" Although it was not wrong for him to call her a little kid in terms of their current age, Nohara-rin was actually of the same generation as Nanashi and the others, and their ages were almost the same. It's just that Nohara-rin died early, and after being resurrected by Orochimaru with the forbidden technique, her age remained at the year of her death and she could no longer grow. Therefore, after so many years, when those of their same age who were still alive had grown up, Nohara-rin still looked like a little girl. HMPH. Nohara-rin snorted coldly and said confidently, "You bunch of hateful Kirigakure ninjas can only play some shameful conspiracies. You must have no good intentions in resurrecting me. I will not do as you wish, and I will definitely destroy your conspiracy completely, just like before." Having experienced being experimented on in the Ryochi cave, she gradually realized that she was just a living dead person who was resurrected. A puppet that was neither alive nor dead. "I want you to see someone." Nana Frost's face had a meaningful smile. Then, he controlled the little girl to turn around slowly through the talisman and looked at the one-eyed mask hiding behind the thorns not far away. "No, no, no, don't tell her." Seeing the weird smile on Nana Frost's face, Obito immediately guessed what the other party was thinking and retreated in fear. He put on the mask, forgot his name, and was determined to cut off everything in the past. However, only Rin was the past that he could never forget and was unwilling to give up. But with his current appearance, he could no longer go back to the past with Rin. If possible, he hoped that Lin's memory would stay in the past, so that Lin would remember the innocent and passionate boy she once was, and never let Lin see her current self. Because the current him would only make Lin hate him. However, the result he expected did not appear after all. The devilish young man in white pointed at him and said to Lin softly, "Did you see the guy wearing the one-eyed mask? He is your most trusted partner, Uchiha Obito." "What?" Hearing this, Nohara-rin could not help but be stunned on the spot. After a long while, she laughed out loud and said, "You Miss Ninjas are really going backwards as you live. You can't even tell lies. If you want to lie to me, then find a reliable reason." "Obito, he died in the Kanabi Bridge War that year. Kakashi and I buried him on the battlefield with our own hands." She cried and shouted the last sentence heartbreakingly. At the same time, Kakuzu outside the barrier listened with relish. He had originally thought that after this battle, he would go to Konoha to check the origins of Uchiha Obito, but who knew that he would hear more interesting information here. And Zetsu, who was standing next to him, felt more and more uneasy. That mysterious young man was getting closer and closer to their secret. "No, you are wrong." Qishuang controlled Nohara-rin and did not let go while looking at the one-eyed mask and said, "You did bury him, but what you don't know is that the place where you buried him is not far from another terrifying strong man nearby." Hearing this, Uchiha Obito looked up in astonishment. He held his head and roared loudly, "Stop talking, stop talking." It has come to this point, how could he not understand that the guy named Qishuang must know what he went through later? It was definitely not a coincidence that the other party could call out his name. But no matter what, he could not imagine why his biggest secret would be known by a stranger who had nothing to do with it. More importantly, he didn't want Lin to know his later experience. However, Nana Qishuang ignored his roar and continued to talk to the little girl. That strong man saved Uchihiro with special thoughts and cured his fatal injuries that you thought were incurable. So far, Uchihiro faked his death and escaped. That's why everyone knows that he is from the Uchiha family, but can't find out his origins. Because he is already a dead person in the files left in Konoha. Hearing this, Kakuzu couldn't help but applaud and said, "Interesting, really interesting." The black Zetsu next to him sank to the bottom of his heart. The situation he was most worried about became a reality. Although that guy didn't mention the name of the strong man who saved Obito, judging from the current situation, the other party couldn't have been unaware of it, but he was a little afraid, so he didn't mention it rashly. HMPH. Nohara snorted again and rebuked him unceremoniously. "You are quite good at making up stories, but as a medical ninja, I know better than anyone how serious Obito's injury is. Half of his body was crushed by the boulder. Even if Lady Tsunade came in person, she couldn't save him. Let me ask you, who else can save such an injury?" Nanashiro sneered. "Just because Tsunade can't do it doesn't mean that others can't do it. If you don't believe it, you might as well go and find that guy to verify it yourself. See if he is Uchihiro Obito." After that, Nanashiro controlled Nohara through the talisman and attacked the one-eyed mask on the other side. "No, no, no. Don't come over. Don't come over." Obito screamed and fled around in the thorny jungle, not daring to fight with Nohara. He was not prepared at all for how he should look when he saw his beloved girl again. Half of the body was crushed, but can it still be saved? At the same time, Meditarumi, who had been watching the fun, also asked Nana Frost the same question. In her opinion, such injuries were completely beyond the treatment range of medical ninjas, and the injured person had entered the countdown to death. Nana Frost controlled Nohara to chase the one-eyed mask, and explained solemnly that terrifying strongman used a special method to save the dying Uchihiro Obito. Moreover, that method itself is a kind of gamble, relying entirely on luck, and there is no reference. Don't worry too much. The material used to repair Obito's body is the White Zetsu clone, and the White Zetsu clone itself has a very strong self-healing ability, which can reorganize and heal with Obito's body. However, allogeneic transplantation itself has rejection, which will have an adverse effect on the host. For smaller organs such as eyes, the rejection will not be too obvious, but Uchihiro Obito has half of his body replaced, and his life is in danger. With such a large number of transplants, it is more likely that he will be rejected by the foreign body and die. But a miracle happened. Uchihiro Obito adapted to the foreign organs transplanted from White Zetsu, and managed to survive. The most hurtful thing is never killing the body, but destroying the heart. Chapter 456 Takeoff. On the other hand, although she was very reluctant to be controlled by others, Nohara gradually became curious about the one-eyed masked man who was obviously stronger than her, but was chased by her, and fled in a panic. It was too strange. She didn't understand why the other party was so afraid of her. Combined with the conversation between the few people just now, she couldn't help but doubt the identity of the one-eyed masked man. At this moment, the cold voice of Nana Frost came from behind again. "Little friend Nohara, I will tell you another interesting news. After your death, your former companion began to hate the world and take revenge on the world. So, on the day when your teacher's wife, Uzumaki Kushina, gave birth." However, before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Obito's angry voice. "Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it." He quickly shook off Nohara behind him and rushed to Nana Frost in a hurry. He couldn't let Nana Frost tell that thing, especially not in front of Rin. Absolutely not. "What, are you angry and can't stand it?" Looking coldly at the one-eyed mask rushing towards him, Qishuang narrowed her eyes and said, "Since you dare to do it, don't be afraid of others knowing it. What's more, you killed Zabuza and Zyao and turned the Kirigakure upside down. We haven't settled this account yet." Uchihiro Obito was furious and said, "So what? That's what you Kirigakure owes me and Rin." As soon as he finished speaking, He came to the two of them and opened his right hand directly to them. Would release Hell's chaos. The right arm instantly turned into a vine, growing and spreading forward at an incredible speed, immediately covering the area of dozens of meters in radius. Qishuang did not entangle with it. At the moment when the vine spread, he immediately took Ming into the air and landed beside Nohara-rin on the other side to reunite. Then, he said to the little girl, your most trusted partner, Uchiha-Obito, took advantage of Kushina's birth and the weakened seal to sneak into the delivery room and capture her. Then he unsealed the seal, released the Nine Tails, and used the power of the Sharingan to control it to wreak havoc in Konoha village, causing heavy casualties in Konoha. Your most respected mentor, Namake's Minato, paid the price of his life to seal the Nine Tails, and his wife Uzumaki Kushina also died because the Nine Tails was extracted from her body. As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar outside the field. Although the fog obscured the situation inside, Nana Shuang did not deliberately cover up her voice, so in addition to the few people on the battlefield, many people outside the field heard their conversation. No one doubted the truth of this, because Uchiha-Obito's angry attitude had proved everything. It turned out that the sensational Nine Tails rebellion was actually like this. At the same time, after hearing him ruthlessly reveal this fact in front of Lin, Uchiha-Obito once again chased after him and shouted angrily, shut up, shut up, shut up. The little girl, who was originally full of fighting spirit and had been secretly resisting Nanashiro's control, immediately wilted. Nonsense, you lied to me. Minato teacher is the Golden Flash, the fastest in the ninja world. No one can kill him. Nohara-Lin argued loudly with red eyes. Nanashiro looked at her coldly and said, Flying Thunder God technique is indeed the fastest in the ninja world. If Minato Namikaze wants to escape, no one can stop him. But in order to protect Konoha village, he chose to seal the Nine Tails with his own strength, and he had no way to retreat, so he died in the end. In the final analysis, it was you, your former good partner, who killed his mentor, and killed many innocent civilians in Konoha. Hearing this, crystal tears rolled down from the corners of Nohara-Lin's eyes. Although she didn't want to admit such a fact, the furious attitude of the one-eyed mask had already explained everything. Her most respected teacher, Minato Namikaze, known as the Golden Flash, was really dead. However, there was one thing she needed to confirm. Wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes, she looked at the one-eyed mask running towards her and said abruptly, Obito, why is this happening? Hearing his most beloved girl speak, Uchiha-Obito's frenzied heart suddenly calmed down. He stopped, slowly took off the mask, and whispered, I'm sorry, Lin. Lin chose to commit suicide to protect Konoha and avoid the crisis of being destroyed by the three-tailed fox, but he personally destroyed everything that Lin had given up her life to protect, and indirectly killed his own mentor. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel a little regretful. However, it was too late, and everything could not be turned back. It turns out to be you, Uchiha-Obito. Nohara-Lin shouted the other party's name with all her strength, but there was a hint of resentment in her voice. Originally, she just wanted to trick the other party and test the other party's identity. It doesn't matter who did those evil things, as long as it wasn't Obito. That's enough. Who would have thought that the result she least wanted to see would appear? Although the face under the mask was not quite the same as the boy in her memory, she still recognized him at a glance. Because every time Obito did something wrong and apologized to her, he looked at a loss. Obito really released the Nine Tails and killed Minato sensei. Why? She looked straight at the man with scars on his right face. Rin, I'm sorry. Uchiha-Obito lowered his head, feeling bitter in his heart, and only this sentence was left in his mouth. Why? Nohara-Rin asked again, but her tone became more and more angry. I'm sorry, Rin. Obito still only said this. At the same time, Black Zetsu outside the barrier saw this scene, and his heart was even more difficult to calm down. After this incident, Uchiha-Obito must have become more obsessed with Nohara-Rin. Judging from the current situation, it is not impossible for the other party to choose to go against that person's plan for that girl. This is the conclusion he came to after seeing all the joys and sorrows in the world, and seeing through everyone's heart. Uchiha-Obito can no longer be trusted, and we must be on guard. In the field, Nanashiro sneered at the man with scars on his right face and said, "Okay, the story is over. We should settle our accounts, Achihirobito." Wait. Just as he was about to take action, Terumi Mei beside him hurriedly stopped him and asked softly, "You haven't told me yet, who is the strong man who saved the dying Achihirobito?" Nanashiro waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "That was an old man. He is probably dead now. Mentioning his name again will only cause unnecessary trouble. I will tell you slowly, when I have time. Now, kill this guy who is causing chaos in Mist Village first." Then, he took out another scroll and motioned to Achihirobito. "This scroll contains the bones of Nohara-rin. If you dare to leave this barrier, I will crush them one by one and turn them into ashes." As for her, Qishuang glanced at the little girl being controlled in front of him and said, "I will ask the most evil wizard in the world to slowly torture her soul so that she will never have peace." Chapter 457 Opportunity. Achihirobito was furious, but he could do nothing about it. Fortunately, the conditions proposed by the other party were not too harsh, so he reluctantly acquiesced. If the other party threatened Lin and asked him to commit suicide, he would never agree. He was not naive to think that the other party would really let Lin go after that. On the other side, Nanashiro put away the scroll, winked at Terumi, suppressed Nohara-rin's personal emotions with a spell, issued an attack order, and rushed out side by side. Berry's abuser and the many people who died in this war, Achihirobito. The cold air gathered in his hand, and an ice spear appeared. Nanashiro stabbed the man with scars on his right face. "You want to kill me? Just rely on you?" Obito looked at him viciously, immediately activated the ability of the right eye to become a virtual, and then rushed towards the ice spear. Nanami followed the ice spear and passed through Obito's illusory figure without feeling any sluggishness. However, Obito's footsteps did not stop, and he continued to rush towards the oncoming little girl. Although Nanami and Nohara-rin started at the same time, Nohara-rin was just a child after all, and her speed could not be compared with his, so she fell behind. "Rin, I'm here to pick you up." Looking at the girl getting closer and closer to him, Obito became more and more excited and stretched out his slightly trembling left hand. It only took a moment, just a little chance, for him to absorb Rin into the different space of his right eye and temporarily get rid of Nanami's control. As for Rin's anger and dissatisfaction, he could explain it slowly later. Now, he just had to bring Rin back. That was enough. Unfortunately, Terumi Mei, who was far away on the other side, did not intend to give him any chance. Dissolving style, dissolving monster technique. Seeing that Obito's hand was about to touch the angry girl, she spit out a large mouthful of milky white mucus. Achihirobito was reluctant to attack Nohara-rin, but it did not mean that she was reluctant. Zzzz. The milky white mucus spread out in the air, like a large white blanket, covering the two of them. Seeing that the thorny branches on which the two of them stood quickly dissolved in the highly corrosive mucus. Because he had not yet begun to absorb Nohara-rin, Obito still had the opportunity to absorb it externally and internally, so he easily avoided the danger of mucus corrosion. However, Nohara-rin did not have such a skill as him, and could not avoid the huge white blanket at all. She was like a snowman in the sun, melting rapidly. "No," he screamed, and subconsciously reached out to grab the girl. However, he forgot that he was in a state of virtualization, and could only look at his hand in astonishment, passing through the girl empty, and could not catch anything. Rin fell in front of him again. Just as this desperate thought appeared in his heart, he was surprised to see that countless dust particles on the mucus were rapidly gathering and condensing, and then once again turned into his beloved appearance. At the same time, Nana Frost's cold voice came from behind. "Thank me, Achihirobito. It was me who gave you the chance to reunite with her. As for the thank you gift, take your life." Then, he saw a cold spear tip piercing out of his chest, and then a white figure followed closely behind, passing through his body along the ice spear. Seeing that there was no place to stay around, Obito did not want to hurt Nohara-rin using wood release, so he had to use the ability of holoization to quickly exit the area covered by mucus. After reuniting with Nohara-rin, Nana Frost also lifted her up and took her out of the mucus area. The strong sticky mucus bound her in it, and even if she could not die with the impure world body, she would become a useless living target. That was not the result he wanted. On the other side, Obito recalled the scene he had just seen and thought secretly, it seems that after Lin's impure earth body is destroyed, it will temporarily stop moving. That's my chance. Next time, I must seize the opportunity and suck Lin into my different space while she can't move. Because Orochimaru had stayed in their organization for a short time, he knew that Orochimaru was studying the forbidden technique of resurrecting the dead Imperial Earth reincarnation. It's just that, because he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he didn't know that the dead of Imperial Earth reincarnation actually have the ability to be immortal. Now, he has learned a lot. Then, he exhaled a long breath of turbid air and rushed towards Qishuang and the other person again. He would not hurt Lin, no matter what, but he knew clearly that, because of Lin's immortal body, the man and woman would definitely not care about Lin's safety. And he only needs to include Lin in their attack range, and when they destroy Lin's impure earth body, his chance will come. Ming, be careful when using the dissolution technique. At the same time, Nana Frost, who was about to fight with Obito again, shouted to the blue-skirted lady not far away. Hearing this, combined with everything she had just seen, Terumi Mei immediately understood what he was thinking. The dissolution technique's line would not hinder Nana Frost, but it would hinder the girl who was no different from a dead person. Then, she temporarily gave up the idea of using the dissolution technique and transformed her chakra into the nature of water. Water style, water dragon bullet technique. A huge blue water dragon surged in front of her and rushed towards the man with a scar on his right face. Boom. Obito easily dodged the water dragon's attack with his ability to become a hollow, but the thorny jungle behind him was smashed to pieces by the water dragon. At the same time, Nana Frost once again approached Obito with an ice spear in her hand, and the ice spear passed through his body, but it still failed. Obito reached out to grab Nohara, who was close at hand, and had become like a puppet. Rin, grab my hand, he shouted loudly. However, the only response he got was an icy kunai. Swish. The girl wielded a kunai and slashed through his hand without hesitation, and immediately saw his black glove being cut open, revealing a red blood mark. Because he had to show his physical body to catch Lin, and he did not expect Lin to be so ruthless, so he was immediately injured by the hands of his most beloved. Just as he was stunned, Qishuang's cold voice came from behind. Don't scream, I have completely suppressed her emotions, and now she is just a machine that only knows how to kill. She will not respond to your call. Taking this opportunity, Qishuang stabbed directly with a spear. However, after being attacked by Nohara, Uchiha Obito immediately entered the hollow state again. Qishuang's spear still missed, but stabbed Nohara in front of Obito. Without the slightest mercy, Qishuang swept Obito, who dodged again, and the ice spear immediately tore Nohara's impure body into two pieces. The opportunity has come. Obito's heart trembled when he saw this, and he immediately burst out, avoiding the sweep of the ice spear, and rushed behind Nohara, then put a hand on her. Chapter 458, Assault. Kamyu chakra gathered in his right eye, and a vortex of void quickly opened in front of Obito, and then a huge suction force acted on Nohara. You want to take her away, have you asked me? Hearing this voice, Obito felt bad. However, the opportunity cannot be missed. Once he missed this opportunity, the two opponents would learn their lesson, and would never give him a second chance. Therefore, Obito made up his mind that, even if he was seriously injured by the two, he would suck Rin into his own space and completely get rid of Nanash's control. Then, he intensified the suction force of the vortex of void. At this moment, when Obito was highly nervous, while maintaining the suction force of his right eye, and guarding against the opponent's sneak attack on his body, Nanashi put his hand on Nohara in an instant. Whoosh! Nohara and Nanashi were sucked into his vortex of void together. How could this happen? Obito was shocked. He never expected that Qishuang knew that he would reveal his physical flaw at this time. Not only did she not sneak attack his body, but she also wanted to seize control of Lin. Caught off guard, he sucked both of them in. Did that guy miss? At this moment, he couldn't help but have such a thought. At this moment, another cry came from his ear. Go to hell. Dissolving style, dissolving monster technique. Looking up, it was Terumi who attacked in anger on the other side. A huge white blanket fell down from the sky. Got Just as Uchiha Obito was about to use his right eye's god's power subconsciously to virtualize his body, he suddenly remembered something. The ability of his right eye to virtualize is not true virtualization, but to hide his body in a different space so that the opponent cannot reach it, so as to achieve the effect of virtualization in the real world. But at this time, Qishuang was hiding in the different space of his right eye. Once he rashly uses his ability to become a hollow, his body will hide in the different space when he is avoiding external attacks. He will be exposed to Qishuang without any defense, and his body will be directly attacked from the different space, and he will be killed in one blow. At this point, he finally figured out why Qishuang didn't sneak attack his body when he showed his physical body, but instead took the risk of being sucked in to compete with him for the control of Lin. It turned out that it was not a mistake at all, but someone did it on purpose. After figuring this out, he couldn't help but sweat coldly and hurriedly stopped the release of God's power, turning over to avoid the white blanket that fell from the sky. This time, you can't use your ability to become a hollow again. Meditarumi looked at him coldly and then formed a set of hand seals again. As early as when Qishuang revealed the information about Obito to her, she deliberately said that Obito's right eye could open the different space to absorb people or objects. It looks very bluffing, but in fact it is just like that. When it's one-on-one, that kind of absorption ability is really terrible. No matter how powerful a master is, once he is trapped and can't find a way to escape, even if he is hungry, he will starve to death in it. But when it's one on many, if Obito rashly absorbs his opponent into the different space, he will fall into the dilemma of being attacked from both sides. That hollow ability has been invalidated from then on. Now, the most difficult hollow ability has been abolished, and Uchiha Obito is no different from an ordinary opponent to her. Once hit by her ninjutsu, he will die. Boiling release. Skillful mist technique. She opened her mouth and spit out a white mist, which quickly spread and expanded around. At this moment, there are only two of them in the barrier, and the opponent can no longer use the hollow ability at will. Her boiling acid mist can completely kill him in this barrier. Seeing that the acid mist is expanding faster and faster, Obito finally made a decision after quickly thinking about the pros and cons. He must first solve the hidden dangers in the different space, otherwise in this state, he can't use the hollow ability at will, which will increase many unnecessary risks. But before entering the alien space, he still had one thing to do. Then, he retreated to avoid the expanding acid mist while turning his fingers to form a set of hand seals. Release. After a light shout, the sky-high flame screen slowly dissipated in the sight of several people, and the water mist and acid mist that were separated by the flame barrier on both sides finally gathered together at this moment. Kakuzu, I'll leave that woman to you. After quickly explaining, Obito opened the void vortex and sucked himself into the alien space. Ice release. Momentary beauty. Unfortunately, Obito had just entered the alien space and had not yet gained a firm foothold. Nanami, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately released the technique that he had accumulated for a long time. A piercing cold air spread in the alien space, and the temperature dropped sharply. Obito, who had no choice but to escape, was immediately submerged in it, feeling like he had suddenly fallen into an ice cellar. Feeling something was wrong, he retreated while turning his fingers, preparing to cast the technique. Fire style. Great fire. Unfortunately, the chakra gathered in his mouth had not yet been completely transformed, and he stopped moving abruptly like a sculpture. It's time for you to pay your blood debt, Uchiha Obito. Cold air gathered in his palm, and a 6-foot-long ice spear condensed in his hand again. Nanoshuang took a step forward and pierced Obito's heart with the spear. Ice style. Chaotic blade gun. Kill. The hand holding the spear shaft twisted lightly, and another stream of ice attribute chakra was input. The ice spear shattered in Obito's body, and the hidden moisture inside seeped out, and then condensed again under the effect of ice attribute chakra. Puff puff puff. In just a moment, countless ice spikes mixed with meat flakes broke out of Obito's chest with blood, piercing him into a hornet's nest. Then, the bright red blood oozed out of the wound, and in just a moment, he turned into a bloody man. A long time ago, Nanoshuang understood that, if he wanted to kill Uchiha Obito without any mistakes, he had to solve the opponent's ability to become a virtual being first. After all, the ability to become a virtual being is the innate ability of the opponent's right eye, and the switch between virtual and real is very convenient. Only a master of physical skills with extremely fast reaction can seize the opponent's flaw in the moment when the entity is exposed and kill him with one blow. And Qishuang himself is obviously not capable of it. Therefore, he thought of a tactic that would prevent Uchiha Obito from using the ability to become a virtual being again, fighting in a different space. The so-called virtual effect is just a trick that Obito hides his body in a different space to avoid external attacks. Once he really enters the different space, his own body will have nowhere to hide and can no longer achieve the effect of virtualization. Therefore, Qishuang took advantage of the time when Obito absorbed Nohara in and took advantage of the situation to get into the opponent's different space. With such a huge hidden danger hidden in it, Obito naturally did not dare to use the ability to become a virtual being again. As long as the Hades outside cooperated a little more, Obito would naturally take the initiative to enter the different space to solve the problem. Nanashiro himself was well rested and had prepared his killer moves early, leaving the opponent no way to avoid them. Just when he thought he had succeeded, he saw a strange smile on the bleeding corners of Uchiha Obito's mouth. Is this your ultimate move? Awesome. Awesome. Ahem. Referring to the part where Kakashi beat up Obito's kidneys in the Kamu space, everyone will understand why Obito cannot use the hollow ability in the different space. What is the truth of the hollow ability? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459. Final Vigor? Nana Frost cried out in surprise. The opponent's chest had been completely smashed by the ice spikes. Unless he had an immortal body, Uchiha Obito would have no chance of surviving. It was at this time that Nana Frost noticed that the luster of Uchiha Obito's left eye was slowly dimming. No, that's not right. It's eyes energy. Thinking of some forbidden technique, Nana Frost's face immediately changed. That was the illusion that the Uchiha family claimed to be able to rewrite fate, eyes energy. At the cost of permanent blindness of one Sharingan, the caster used this illusion on himself and then reversed the real world into a false dream. If ordinary illusions make the victims take the false as the real, then this illusion makes people take the real as the false. From this perspective, eyes energy is a reversal illusion. It is also to reverse the real into the false. When the caster uses this technique on himself, when he encounters an unfavorable situation, he can reverse it into a false dream, thus achieving the result of rewriting reality. In other words, the ninja who casts eyes energy will see a world that is only beneficial to him, because all the factors that are unfavorable to him are reversed into false dreams. You know a lot. You even know the forbidden techniques of the Uchiha family. Uchiha Obito grabbed Nana Frost's ice spear with one hand, and a piece of wood stuck out from the palm of his other hand. As early as the last time he used up his left Sharingan to fight the three-tailed beast, he replaced it with another substitute. Especially after knowing that Nana Frost had mastered the flaws of his many abilities, in order to be on the safe side, he deliberately used the transfer seal to seal eyes energy in his left eye, and set the opening condition. When in a fatal crisis, the seal will automatically open, and eyes energy will be cast at the cost of the left eye. Unexpectedly, this backhand was really used. However, he couldn't figure out what happened just now. He was about to cast the great fireball technique, but suddenly someone pierced his heart with a spear and stabbed him with ice like a hornet's nest. It felt like his memory was broken. Although he was confused, Obito still didn't show courtesy to his opponent. Under the cover of talking, he pressed his right hand directly on Nana Frost's face. Then the chakra suddenly burst out, urging the wood thorn to grow. The wood thorn in his palm was like a crossbow arrow, and it only took a moment to knock the stunned opponent away. But he didn't stop his attack and immediately chased after him, because he knew that it was still difficult to cause fatal damage to that guy just by doing this. At this time, all the ice thorns on his body disappeared, and there was no trace of blood. Everything that was unfavorable to him just now was reversed by eyes energy into a false dream. Even the freezing characteristics of the opponent's ice escape chakra were meaningless to him. But in this state, he can retain the conditions that are favorable to him. For example, the blow that just blew Nana Frost away. This is a gap that his right eye's ability to virtualize cannot match. This is the power of Uchiha's ultimate illusion. Unfortunately, the power of this illusion has a time limit and cannot be continued indefinitely. However, this shortcoming is not a shortcoming for him, because he still has a lot of Sharingan in stock, a lot. Fire style, great fireball technique with his right hand, clenched into a tube. Obito opened his mouth and spit out a small flame. After passing through the palm of his right hand, the small flame turned into a giant fireball with a diameter of 4 or 5 meters, and rushed straight to the figure, who had just climbed up on the ground. Qishuang did not waste any extra chakra to counterattack, and dodged directly to the side, and the fireball brushed his body to the other side. This is trouble. Failed to kill Obito in one blow, his mood gradually became heavy. Because the killer move has been revealed, the next time he uses momentary beauty, I'm afraid it won't be so effective. More importantly, he clearly remembered that Uchiha Obito slaughtered his entire family and confiscated a lot of Sharingan as trophies and hid them in this different space. Even though Ai's energy itself has a time limit, the opponent can also use the spare eye as a disposable consumable to maintain this illusion that reverses reality. The result is that he can't hurt Uchiha Obito, and the opponent can't break his body defense. No one can do anything to each other, and it becomes a long-lasting war of attrition. Tell me, where did you hide Lin again? The fireball dissipated, and Uchiha Obito stopped the technique, and shouted angrily, and rushed up again. It was not until he used Ai's energy to get out of trouble that he realized that there was no trace of Lin in the different space. Obviously, that hateful guy hid Lin again. Of course I sealed her back into the scroll again. What can you do if you know it? The cold air condensed in his palm, and the ice spear reappeared. Qishuang went up fearlessly. Because he had left a hidden hand in the outside world before, he could only stay in this different space for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, the hidden hand he left behind will be activated to send himself out of this dead cage. In this limited time, he could only try his best to see if he could catch Uchiha Obito changing the spare Sharingan in the gap when Ai's energy was ineffective. As far as he knew, the effectiveness of Ai's energy varied from person to person. In his memory, Uchiha Obito had used it once when he fought with the origami woman, but even so, Uchiha Obito was still blown off one of his arms by the 10-minute explosion of the 600 billion detonation talisman C. In other words, the 10-minute explosion exceeded the sum of the duration of Obito's hollow ability and Ai's energy, leaving him no way to avoid it, which was why one of his arms was blown off. Qishuang also clearly remembered that Uchiha Obito's hollow ability lasted about 5 minutes. In other words, the opponent's Ai's energy must last less than 5 minutes. Therefore, within these 15 minutes, he will have at least 3 chances to kill him. Ding. The wooden thorns collided with the ice spears, and the ice crystal spread down along the wooden thorns, but disappeared in an instant. It's useless. Don't waste your energy struggling. Uchiha Obito hastily launched a close-range attack, and said proudly, since you know Ai's energy, then you should know that in this state, there is no way to hurt me. Hearing this, Qishuang couldn't help but sneer, including your Uchiha family's Ai's enemy. Hearing this, Obito's face changed. Ai's enemy is another forbidden illusion of the Uchiha family, which was born just to restrain Ai's energy. Only Ai's enemy can break the illusion effect of Ai's energy. But on second thought, since the other party knows the forbidden technique of Ai's energy, it is not surprising that he also knows the Ai's enemy illusion that was born from it. More importantly, the other party does not have the Sharingan, so it is impossible for him to use the forbidden technique of Ai's enemy. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel relieved. Chapter 460 Time Limit. You know what? You can't use Ai's enemy to deal with my Ai's energy. Obito shouted loudly, while holding a wooden spike and attacking wildly. With the dynamic vision ability of the Sharingan, any Uchiha clan member can become a master of physical skills. And Nana Frost's physical skills level was originally not as good as his, but because the freezing ability of the ice chakra on the surface of the body was very tricky, Obito had never dared to fight with her in close combat. At this moment, relying on ice energy to eliminate the negative effects of the ice chakra, he attacked wildly in close combat, beat her back step by step, and swept away the depression that he had no place to attack earlier. Of course, Uchiha Obito could only have fun, and couldn't really do anything to Nana Frost, because he couldn't break through the tough chakra coat defense. I hope that after the time limit of ice energy is over, you still have the confidence to talk to me like this. Nana Frost only attacked and didn't defend, and retorted without any politeness. With the protection of the chakra coat, he didn't need to worry about getting hurt. But even if he fought back desperately, he still couldn't reverse the gap in physical skills between him and his opponent. With the dynamic vision of the Sharingan, Uchiha Obito saw the opportunity first and always avoided his attack in advance. There were a few times when he couldn't avoid being hit by him, but it was still not painful. At the same time, hearing his words, Obito immediately reacted that the opponent was preparing to attack again during the ice energy time limit. Then, he stopped attacking and quickly retreated, saying coldly, "Your plan is not bad, but unfortunately you don't know one thing. I have more than just these two Sharingans. I have more eyes to use." After saying that, he waved his hand, and Qishuang saw a piece of floating stone floating over not far away, with dozens of glass vessels placed on it, and eyeballs soaked in them. Looking closely again, those eyeballs were all red, and there were black magatama inside. Some were 1, some were 2, and some were 3. They were all Sharingans. This is just a small part of what I carry with me. I have more Sharingan stored elsewhere. Obito waved his hand again, and the floating stone disappeared among the rubble. As long as I want, I can replace them at will, and continue the ice energy. You will never have the chance to catch the moment when the technique fails, he said to Nana Frost proudly. Nana Frost did not reply, but just counted the time silently, and the look in her eyes when she looked at Obito became colder. At this moment, about 4 minutes had passed since the opponent used ice energy. It was time for him to take action. He could not accurately judge the specific time when the opponent's technique would fail, so he could only take action in advance, forcing Uchiha Obito to have no chance to replace his eyes. When the time limit of ice energy was up, it would be the opponent's death. Ice release. Ice dragon bullet technique. The cold air condensed around him, and then turned into an ice dragon, holding him tightly in its mouth, and rushed straight towards Uchiha Obito, who was not far away. With the Sharingan's foresight, Obito didn't take the long-range ninjutsu attack seriously and easily avoided the ice dragon's impact. Boom. The ice dragon hit the rock and exploded with a bang, and countless ice cubes flew everywhere. How is it possible? Obito was confused. After dodging an ice cube, he still remembered that the opponent had used this technique to withstand the attack of dozens of gods and did not fall into a disadvantage in a short period of time. After a long time, everyone worked together to smash the ice dragon. It was such a hard ice dragon, but it was easily smashed on the rock in his different space. This was unreasonable. Although the pumice stones in his different space were all in the shape of standard cubes, in terms of hardness, they were no different from the rocks in the outside world. Soon, his doubts were answered. A 2-meter square block of solid ice flew over. Just as he was about to dodge sideways, a figure suddenly appeared in the ice. He saw it jump out of the ice and approach him. So it was deliberately blasting the ice dragon and using the scattered ice to create a foothold. Obito quickly used the wooden spike in his hand to block the ice spear and suddenly realized it. Just as he was about to use physical skills to beat his opponent again, the increasingly blurred vision of his left eye suddenly went dark. No, the illusion time limit is up. Thinking that it was not good, he hurriedly pulled back. The forbidden technique performed at the cost of the Sharingan. When that eye is completely blind, it means that the time limit of the technique has expired. Want to leave? Don't you think it's too late? With one hand on a piece of solid ice next to him, Qishuang snorted coldly and disappeared on the spot. Obito couldn't help but shrink his pupils slightly when he saw it, and the sound of breaking air came from behind him. Turning his head, he saw Nana Frost appearing beside a piece of solid ice not far behind him, shooting 4 or 5 kunai at him. There were detonating talismans tied to the end of the kunai. I understand. He wants to use continuous attacks to stop me from changing my eyes and using eyes energy, and then wait for an opportunity to kill me. Only then did he finally understand the other party's plan. No matter how many pairs of eyes he can replace, as long as there is no chance to replace and transplant, no matter how many spare eyes he has, it will be useless. Then, he opened his right hand directly at the kunai that was shot. In just a moment, his entire arm turned into a rough and huge vine, completely blocking the kunai on the other side. Boom boom boom. Accompanied by fire and smoke, Obito's figure disappeared in front of him. Nana Frost took advantage of the cover of the explosion and rushed in with an ice spear. Missing this opportunity made Obito defensive, and it would be more difficult to kill him next time. Soon, he found a vague figure in the smoke and dust, and he threw the ice spear in his hand without hesitation, hitting the target immediately. He walked quickly forward, but before he could check, he saw Obito, who was pierced by the ice spear, exploded into a cloud of white smoke with a bang. Duplicate? Knowing that he had fallen into a trap, Qishuang immediately searched for Uchiha Obito's figure. The smoke and dust from the explosion dissipated quickly, and Qishuang found Uchiha Obito again in a short time. After all, apart from the square rock floating in the void, there were only 2 living people, and the slightest movement would be very conspicuous. On a piece of floating stone not far away, Uchiha Obito was holding a glass container in his hand, showing him a triumphant smile. Obviously, the other party took the spare eye, while the clone attracted his attention. You are too happy too early. Noticing a large piece of broken ice near Obito, Qishuang rushed to another piece of broken ice nearby, and with the help of ice escape, she immediately rushed to the floating stone where Obito was. Looking at the young man in white who was chasing him, Obito said meaningfully, "Do you think I'm really stupid enough to replace my eyes here?" After that, he jumped directly from the floating stone and fell into the endless space gap. Kamio Obito is a younger brother, but as long as he doesn't commit suicide, no one can kill him. Chapter 461 Helpless. When Qishuang chased to the edge of the rock, she found that Uchiha Obito opened the void vortex in the gap and left this alien space. Oh no, that bastard is going to replace his eyes outside and doesn't give me a chance to attack. Qishuang's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. The other party is the master of this alien space and has the ability to come and go freely, which is an advantage that he can't match at all. Going to the outside world to replace eyes will undoubtedly completely avoid the risk of being attacked by him. Outside the alien space, because the flame barrier was revoked by Uchiha Obito, the isolated and helpless Terumi Mei was immediately targeted by Kakuzu and Manzuki. Kakuzu is a type that can be used at both long and short distances, and Manzuki controls 4 ninja swords and is even better in close combat. But close combat is still her weakness. Facing the attack of the two, she was exhausted and unable to fight back. She even dared not let the 2 terrible guys get close to her. Fortunately, she got inspiration from Qishuang's ice escape field and used a lot of chakra to create a field of molten mucus for herself. In this area, her movement will not be restricted in any way, and those enemies who rush in will be stuck to it by the strong sticky mucus, and finally corroded and turned into pus. Knowing the danger of the dissolving mucus, Manzuki Hazuki did not dare to go deep into it. He just cruised around the periphery of the area, watching covetously, and cooperated with Kakuzu's clone's attack to harass constantly, which made Terumi Mei very annoyed. Kakuzu relied on the power of his earth spear to protect himself, and broke into the mucus area with great confidence. Unfortunately, his earth spear can indeed protect his body from the corrosion of mucus, but it cannot avoid the trouble caused by the strong stickiness of mucus. With his strength, although he was not completely stuck to it and unable to move after being trapped in it, every step he took was very difficult, and the speed of movement was reduced by more than 50%. Therefore, the moment he entered the mucus area, he was immediately regarded as a living target for ninjutsu, and was beaten up by Terumi Mei. Although the earth spear was used to protect him, those ninjutsu attacks were not very effective, but Kakuzu felt a little embarrassed to be beaten by such a vase-like little girl. After all, he was a man who had fought with the god of ninja. After trying several times in a row, and finding that he could not get close to the opponent, Kakuzu had no choice but to withdraw from the mucus field and chose to use the consumption tactics of using his clone to perform ninjutsu attacks from the periphery of the field. Because the Earth Resentment secret technique plundered the opponent's heart and meridians, his body was transformed, and his chakra volume far exceeded that of ordinary people. Although the chakra volume of the little girl opposite was also more than that of ordinary people, it was still far behind him. He could easily take her down, as long as the opponent's chakra was exhausted. At this moment, seeing a vortex of void opening in the thorny bush not far away, and Uchiha Obito coming out of it, Meditarumi immediately sprayed a high-pressure water bomb over. Obito, who didn't dare to use his hollow ability to block it, had to dodge sideways, and then quickly dug out his dim left eye, and threw it away, and then stuffed the Sharingan in his other hand into it. He felt a strange itch in his left eye socket, and then slowly a little light appeared. He knew that it was the growth of granulation in the eye socket, connecting the newly transplanted Sharingan with his visual center. It was because half of his body was made up of the white Zetsu clone, and he had obtained the powerful self-healing ability of the white Zetsu clone, and because he was born an Uchiha, his physique and Sharingan were extremely compatible, so he could transplant it quickly and put it to use immediately. For an ordinary person, even if the factor of physical matching was not considered, it would take a very long time for the wound to recover without the assistance of medical ninjutsu. After avoiding a water bullet shot by Meditarumi again, Obito hid behind a thick thorn and reminded diagonally, "Be careful, don't let others take advantage of you." After that, he glanced at main Jetsu Kizuki on the other side. "Who do you think I am? I'm not so easy to get." Kakuzu replied confidently, and then gave Hazuki main Jetsu a warning look. Ahem. Hazuki main Jetsu pretended not to see it, but secretly strengthened his vigilance. Then, Uchiha Obito opened the vortex of the void again with the help of his right eye, and then walked in. However, at the same time as entering the different space, he once again used Izanagi at the cost of his left eye. Puff. Just after entering the different space, a cold ice spear pierced through his chest again. Everything was as he expected. The guy in the different space would not miss such a good opportunity to sneak attack. But unfortunately, he was protected by the illusion of Izanagi, and all the factors that were unfavorable to him would turn into a dream of nothingness. "Give up, all your moves are meaningless to me." Looking at the young man at the other end of the ice spear, Obito sneered and stretched out his right hand. Then, after the stimulation of wood-released chakra, a sharp wooden thorn protruded from his palm again, stabbing straight into the opponent's face and knocking him out in one fell swoop. "No matter how powerful your hidden power is, it means nothing to me. As long as you return Lin to me, I will let you leave safely." Obito rushed up with the wooden thorn. Hastily stabilizing his position, Qishuang raised the ice spear and quickly counterattacked, snorting coldly, "I can leave your damn place without your charity. It can't trap me." Hearing this, Obito, who was attacking in a hurry, couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This guy's really terrible. Not only did he know his abilities very well, but he also prepared strategies to deal with them one by one. On the other hand, he didn't know much about this enemy, almost nothing. Although he had a little advantage with the power of Izanagi, he could only barely maintain a draw. Originally, he had hoped to use this different space to trap him to death in it, but now it seems that this plan is going to fail. Now, he has used all his means, but the other party still has reservations. He can't see any hope of winning the battle. Thinking of this, he stopped attacking, retreated far to the side, and said helplessly, "Tell me, how can you return Lin to me?" Seeing that he had no intention of fighting again, Qishuang also stopped. He wanted to kill Uchiha Obito and avenge Zabuza and Zyuobe, but the reality was so cruel. Uchiha Obito's ability to save his life was too strong. There was no possibility of killing him in a short time. Just like the other party had no choice but to choose to negotiate, he could only choose to negotiate. After all, life still has to go on, and there is no point in dragging hatred and entanglement. Then, Qishuang took out a scroll, and after unsealing it in a few seconds, a girl with short brown hair appeared next to him again. But this time, he deliberately controlled it so that Nohara Lin's will remain dormant and did not wake up. He pointed to the little girl standing in front of him and said solemnly, "I want you to swear in her name Take your people, leave Kirigakure forever, and never harass again. Chapter 462 Oath. Hearing this, Obito's pupils shrank slightly, and he sneered, "You are quite smart. You know how to use Lin to force me to leave." The Hidden Mist village has been tossed around by him for almost everything, and there is not much point in staying. If they can exchange Lin for their departure, it will be a good deal. However, he still feels a little unwilling to leave like this. Then, Obito said playfully, "But what if I don't agree?" Nanashiro took out another scroll, glanced at the little girl beside him, and said solemnly, "The Nohara Lin you see now is just a living dead who used the immortal reincarnation to attach her soul to someone else's body. And what is sealed in this scroll is exactly her remains, left after her death. If you refuse my conditions, I will grind her remains into powder and scatter them in front of you bit by bit, then control her current filthy body, to go to Konoha to assassinate her former acquaintances and friends." Uchiha Obito felt cold in his heart after hearing this. Since the Ninetales Rebellion, he has abandoned his feelings for Konoha, so no matter how many people Lin killed in Konoha, his will not be shaken in the slightest. But Lin can't do that. Lin loves Konoha deeply, and would rather sacrifice her life to protect Konoha. If she were to kill her former acquaintances and friends with her own hands, it would be more painful for Lin than facing death. It is simply the most terrible torture. Lin will not be able to bear it. He can't let Lin suffer this kind of mental torture. Helplessly, he could only nod and whispered, "Okay, I swear in the name of Lin, if you return Lin to me, I will take my people away from Kirigakure and never harass you again. If you break it, I will never see Lin again." Seeing him swear, Nanashiro took out another scroll, sealed Nohara Lin in it, and then threw the scroll over. After catching the scroll, Obito's face had a strange smile. "Do you think that a mere oath can really restrain me? Naive guy. Ha 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 ha." After fighting for a long time without success, he could get Lin back so easily. He couldn't help but laugh triumphantly. Nanashiro said calmly, "Of course I know that a few weak oaths alone can't restrain you, so I still have Nohara Lin's remains in my hand. So what?" Uchiha Obito waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "Rin with an impure body is no different from a living person. Do you think that, after getting Lin's impure body, I will still care about those broken bones in your hand?" Ha ha ha. Looking at the man who was carried away by his own pride with cold eyes, Nanashiro said calmly, "There is one thing I didn't tell you. Nohara Lin now exists because of the Imperial World reincarnation, and naturally she can also disappear because of the Imperial World reincarnation. Although you have her now, you can't really maintain her existence." Hearing this, Obito's laughter stopped abruptly, and a large area of his vest was wet. He was indeed too happy too early. Lin exists because of the Impure World reincarnation, so naturally she cannot escape the constraints of the Impure World reincarnation. Once the caster cancels the spell, Lin will naturally not exist in the world. At this moment, although he wants Lin's Impure World reincarnation back, it can be taken away by someone else at any time. Seeing that Obito's face is getting uglier and uglier, Nana Frost waved the remaining scroll in his hand and continued, "More importantly, the use of the Impure World reincarnation requires biological intelligence of a specific target, and I have the remains of Nohara Rin in my hand. Once the spell is cancelled, I can still use it as a medium to summon Nohara Rin's soul from the Pure Land again. Although he can't perform the Impure World reincarnation, and Nohara Rin was not summoned by him, and he can't cancel the spell, this doesn't prevent him from using it to scare Uchiha Obito. Because now, the other party has regarded him as the summoner of Nohara Rin." Hearing this, Uchiha Obito's face suddenly turned the color of liver. The remains that he didn't care about originally actually had such an effect, which was really beyond his expectation. However, this is not his fault. Every member of the organization is a traitor, not a good person. Although everyone works together, they cannot fully trust each other. Therefore, each member only has some general understanding of each other, not too detailed. Just like Scorpion's puppet body. Obito knew that Scorpion's body was a puppet, but he didn't know that Scorpion's weakness was the heart parts, which led to him temporarily grabbing the wrong things. As a result, Scorpion died in Kirigakure. As for the forbidden technique of immortality reincarnation, he heard about it from Orochimaru. He only knew that it could revive the dead, but he didn't know that there were so many twists and turns in it. Then, he frowned at Nanashiro and asked, "Then how can you return Lin's remains to me? In view of your worrying character, I decided to return Nohuru Lin's remains to you 10 years later." Nanashiro said with narrowed eyes. The so-called 10-year agreement is just a delaying tactic. He didn't allow Bito to come to Kirigakure, but he didn't say that he wouldn't take the initiative to attack. If a Bito still can't be killed in 10 years, then what's the difference between him and a pig? As for whether a Bito will keep his oath and stop harassing Kirigakure during the 10 years, Nana Frost doesn't know. But he knows that, as long as Obito still cares about Nohura-rin, he will definitely keep his oath. Especially now that the other party has obtained Nohura-rin's impure body, his wish has been fulfilled, and he will never let go easily. In addition, with the threat of his removal technique, I think the other party will definitely try his best to keep his oath. Hearing this, Obito shook his head. 10 years, too long. Then 20 years will be fine. Nana Frost said coldly. If you haven't got it, you won't be afraid of losing it. Now that Obito has got it, he is not afraid that the other party will not agree. Obito was angry and annoyed, but he could do nothing about it. After a long silence, he sighed helplessly. Then let's still 10 years. I will abide by the oath I made to Rin, take my people away, and never appear in the land of water again. The goal was achieved, and the hidden danger of Obito was temporarily solved. Nana Frost felt a lot more relieved. However, when he thought of the death of Zabuza and others, and the tragic situation of Kirigakure, he still couldn't swallow this breath. Then, he came up with a plan, and said to Obito, Nohura-rin is now just a living dead, just a puppet whose soul is bound by the immortal reincarnation, and there is no future to speak of. But I know a way to turn her into a real living person, completely get rid of the shackles of the immortal reincarnation, and give you a chance to start over with her. Obito was shocked at first, and then sneered. Are you willing to tell me? Of course I'm willing to tell you. Nana Frost's face has a hint of playfulness. There is no free lunch in the world. Tell me, what do you want? Knowing that he had bad intentions, Obito still couldn't refuse the temptation to truly revive Rin. No, I don't want anything. I just like to help others, and want to help you, a lovelorn man. The smile on Nana Frost's face became brighter. Obito snorted coldly, and he didn't believe a word of such nonsense. They were enemies, but they had only reached a temporary truce and a compromise. Tell me, what's the method? He asked coldly. Chapter 463 Conspiracy. Then, under Obito's expectant gaze, Nana Frost uttered 4 words one by one. Rinsamza Raten Samawat. Obito's heart was once again filled with a huge wave. You even know this. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Nana Frost deeply. Nana Frost said nonchalantly, I even know that he saved your life and taught you the Uchiha flame formation. How could I not know this Rinsamza Raten Sama? Compared to the immortal reincarnation, the Rinsamza Raten Sama is the true technique of bringing the dead back to life. Then, in front of Uchiha Obito's astonished eyes, he continued to talk to himself. If you want to use reincarnation to revive the dead, you must gather 5 necessary conditions. The first is the body of the deceased. If the dead are to be resurrected, the soul must have a place to stay, so the body of the dead must be roughly preserved intact. The second is that the soul of the dead must exist safely in the Pure Land. If the soul is sealed by someone, resurrection will naturally become empty talk. The third is a huge amount of vitality. The resurrection of the dead must have vitality, and that vitality is something that the corpse does not have. If the corpse wants to gain vitality, it can only rely on the caster to share it. If the caster does not have enough vitality, he naturally cannot revive the dead. The fourth is to master the method of performing the reincarnation technique. The fifth and most critical point is that reincarnation must be performed with the help of the legendary Samsara. As he said, he looked at the scroll in Obito's hand and said, Nohura-rin's soul is now lodged in a special body created by immortal reincarnation. Although it is different from her original body, it can be replaced by the impure world body. You have already met the first and second conditions. As for the third condition, he looked at the other person in a suggestive way and continued, half of your body is reconstructed by the clone of White Zetsu, So you naturally have the characteristics of his large amount of vitality, and you are fully capable of performing reincarnation. And the technique of reincarnation was also taught to you by that person. The only thing you lack now is the last condition, the Samsara eye. After saying that, he looked at Uchiha Obito's red right eye and smiled meaningfully. The Samsara eye is one of the 3 major eye techniques in the ninja world. The other 2 refer to Uchiha's Sharingan and Hyuga's Byakugan. However, the Samsara eye has never appeared since the 6 Paths Sage, so it has been regarded as a legendary eye technique by later generations. But Nana Frost knows that there happens to be a pair of Samsara eyes in the current ninja world. And the original owner of the Samsara eyes is the person who saved Uchiha Obito's life. But now, that person is dead, and the eyes have been entrusted to another person for safekeeping. What else do you know? Looking at the calm young man in white, Uchiha Obito felt more and more daunted. He felt that under that pair of sharp eyes, he could not hide any secrets. I said, I know more than you think. After sneering twice, Qishuang continued, the owner of the eyes is next to you, and he can also use reincarnation. It's just that, because reincarnation is too powerful, a person can only use it once in his life. And he is different from you. He has real ideals and beliefs. It's impossible for him to waste a precious opportunity for such a little girl. If you want to ask him to help you revive Nohara-in, I'm afraid it will be a bit difficult. Have you thought about what to do, Uchiha Obito? After saying that, Qishuang's face showed a playful smile again. Reincarnation is the arrangement made by the first owner of the Rinnegan for his own resurrection. The second owner of the Rinnegan and Uchiha Obito were the ones chosen by him to revive himself to create a new ninja world. However, although they both shouted the same slogan, to create a new ninja world to achieve peace, in fact, Uchiha Obito and the second owner of the Rinnegan had a big difference in their ideological awareness. The second owner of the Rinnegan was really enlightened and saw through everything. He could sacrifice himself to revive that person in order to create a new ninja world and achieve peace. But Uchiha Obito couldn't do that. He created the ninja world in order to reunite with Nohara-in. He had his own selfish desires and wanted to create the world according to his own wishes. The difference in their thoughts was like that between the drunken sword immortal and the sword saint. The sword saint let go of everything, but the drunken sword immortal couldn't. And Uchiha Obito was the drunken sword immortal. He would make some unexpected choices for things that he couldn't let go of. Nohara-in was the knot that Uchiha Obito couldn't let go of. Now, he has come to a fork in the road where he needs to make a choice. I believe that things will become very interesting when he leaves Kirigakure and meets the second owner of the Samsara eye. You are such a good person who likes to help others. After hearing what Nana Frost said, Obito looked at him deeply, his tone full of sarcasm. If he wants to revive Rin, he must use the Samsara eye. And considering the importance of the Samsara eye, the person in the organization will naturally not give it to him easily. As for asking that person to revive Rin, this is also a difficult problem that is unlikely to be completed. He knows that person too well. Just as Nana Frost said, that person has real ideals and beliefs and will never waste the precious Samsara life on personal desires. If not, the other party would have used the Samsara life to revive his most important partner long ago. Instead of fiddling with the corpse of his partner all the time, he would miss him when he saw the corpse. Nana Frost deliberately revealed that the Samsara life could revive Rin and get rid of the control of the immortal reincarnation. This was an open conspiracy to provoke a disagreement between him and that person. In other words, Nana Frost even knew their organizational structure and even the purpose of their activities very well. This move was aimed at their organization. However, even though he knew it was an open conspiracy, he couldn't help but have strange thoughts about the Samsara eye. Countless years of longing made him unable to let go of Lin. Now, he was only one step away from becoming a reality. He no longer had to follow the difficult path arranged by that person. Especially now that the person was dead and had no power to restrain him. He could do whatever he wanted. As long as Lin was resurrected, they could go anywhere, and everything in the ninja world would have nothing to do with them. It's almost time. It's time for me to leave here. Looking at the floating stones floating in the void around him, Qishuang sighed helplessly. 15 minutes had already passed. I hope you don't forget the oath you made before. Otherwise you should understand what the consequences are. He once again solemnly warned Obito. Time's up. At the same time, outside the different space, Shinzin Shenji, who was floating in the air, chuckled and slowly formed a set of hand seals. The sword master has selfless love, so he will follow the way of heaven. Nagato guarded Yahiko's body and didn't revive him because his mindset was higher than Obito's. Obito didn't have this awareness. Just like someone who quits smoking, he vowed to quit at first, but after the first day, the second day, his willpower couldn't hold on. Obito was the drunken swordsman who couldn't let go. Chapter 464 Action. On the ground, Mediterumi fought 1 against 2. Although Kakuzu and main Jetsu Kizuki had conflicts with each other, and the ground was covered with a slime field by her, so the other party could not get close easily, but the two were strong men who were not weaker than her. After just 15 minutes of fighting, she was already a little overwhelmed. Especially Kakuzu's 4 clones. Their ninjutsu attacks were even more powerful, like tireless ninjutsu launchers, always floating outside the field, constantly launching ninjutsu bombardment at her. In order to resist the offensive of the 4 clones, Mediterumi consumed a lot of chakra and was exhausted at this moment, almost reaching her limit. Although she was on the verge of despair, she did not feel the slightest despair, but her fighting spirit became stronger. Because she knew that the time agreed with Nanashi was coming. As early as when she was falling from the sky, Nanashi had told her that once he was sucked into Obito's different space, don't be nervous, and he will naturally get out of trouble once the 15-minute time limit is up. Now, the 15 minutes have come. At this moment, just as she hurriedly dodged a gust of wind, a pair of dark brown arms shot out from the gust of wind and grabbed her directly. It was Kakuzu on the other side who saw that she was exhausted and felt that the time was ripe, so he took advantage of the wind to launch a surprise attack. Sensing the sudden attack, Terumi Mei was about to mobilize the mucus on the ground to resist, but due to excessive chakra consumption and mental fatigue, she was somewhat powerless, and the speed of the spell was much slower than at the beginning. The mucus on the ground had just surged less than 1 meter high, and the pair of dark brown hands had already grabbed her neck. Wow. The spell was interrupted, and the mucus mud wall that had just surged collapsed again. Terumi Mei struggled desperately, but she was not a power-type ninja, and faced with the pair of iron-like hands, she could not shake at all. At the same time, seeing Kakuzu succeed, Hazuki main Jetsu moved. He rushed into the slime field in an instant, and then slid quickly on the slime field like a slippery eel, not affected by the strong viscosity of the slime at all. That's the oil slide of the second Mizukage? Kakuzu was shocked. Having lived long enough, he naturally had more experience. After a little thought, he saw the reason why main Jetsu Kizuki could move quickly on the slime field. Ahem, you have a good eye. This is indeed the secret technique left by the second Mizukage. However, only our main Jetsu family has it. Main Jetsu looked back at him and quickly approached Mediterumi. Oil slide is an ability to wrap oily water around the soles of the feet, ignoring the terrain and gliding like on the water in any environment. Therefore, he didn't take the strong viscosity of Mediterumi's slime field seriously from the beginning. It was just because he was a little worried about Kakuzu that he didn't use his full strength. Now, he no longer needs to hide. As for the strong corrosiveness of the mucus, as long as he does not stay in the mucus field for too long, it will not have much impact. It is just a little loss, which is still within the tolerance range of his liquefied body, and can be slowly restored. Don't even think about it. Seeing that main Jetsu Kizuki was planning to snatch someone from him, Kakuzu retracted the grey-black tentacles at the end of his arm, hoping to pull Mediterumi to his side, while commanding the 4 clones to change their attack targets, to prevent main Jetsu Kizuki from approaching. Unfortunately, although the 4 clones were full of strength to perform ninjutsu, facing main Jetsu Kizuki who performed the oil slide, and was extremely fast, their ninjutsu attacks were difficult to hit the opponent. In just a blink of an eye, main Jetsu Kizuki broke through the blockade and caught up with Mediterumi who was dragged by Kakuzu. Water style, water prison technique. After quickly forming a set of hand seals, he grabbed one of the hands of the blue-skirted beauty, and then a blue stream of clear water flowed out from his palm and covered her whole body. At the same time, Manyu's other hand grabbed the hilt behind him and slashed the grey-black tentacles behind Kakuzu's arms with a square-shaped sword inlaid with scrolls. Explode. With a light shout, the blade that fell on the grey-black tentacles lit up with dazzling flames. Kakuzu only felt a sharp pain at the end of the tentacles, and then he lost the perception of his arms. His arms were cut off by the opponent through the power of the explosion. Fortunately, his body was transformed by the secret technique of Earth Resentment, and as long as it was not completely destroyed, it could be repaired. The two broken arms could be reattached with special tentacles. After a successful attack, Manu used the smoke screen produced by the explosion as a cover, carrying a large water bowl and hurriedly leaving the mucus field, preparing to completely leave the battlefield. His goal had been achieved. As for the rest of the battle, he had no interest in participating. Just leave it to Uchiha Obito and the others. Unfortunately, Kakuzu did not intend to let Manu go. Leave my arms behind, he shouted, and countless grey-black tentacles emerged from his elbows, like sharp arrows, shooting towards the hastily retreating Hazuki Maingetsu. It was fine if he could catch Meditarumi, but he didn't care whether he could catch Kakuzu. What he cared about was the two arms that remained on the other's neck. If he couldn't get them back, his body couldn't be repaired. Unfortunately, Hazuki Maingetsu slid quickly and flexibly on the ground with the oily slide. No matter how angry Kakuzu was, his arrow-like tentacles could not reach the other. Give it back to you. Seeing that he was chasing him, Hazuki Maingetsu didn't want to get entangled with him, so he immediately took off the two arms on Meditarumi's neck and threw them straight over. Then, the tentacles that spread out from Kakuzu's elbows quickly entangled the two thrown arms and reconnected with the broken tentacles on the arms. Then, the perception of the two arms appeared in his nerve center again. At the same time, Shiamzin Shenji in the sky cut her left thumb and then drew a blood mark on the palm of her right hand and then pressed her palm into the void. Summoning technique, the dark array pattern spread from under her palm and expanded rapidly to the surroundings. In the different space of the Sharingan, Qishuang suddenly felt that there was a force acting on her, and then the void broke and disappeared in front of Uchiha Obito. Only a white smoke screen was left on the spot, which made Obito stunned. After a long time, he came back to his senses. The guy who made him so afraid had left his back garden. In the outside world, on the black array pattern in front of Shiamzin Shenji, accompanied by white smoke, a figure suddenly appeared in it. Boy, if the time you agreed on was later, that little girl would be dead. Shiamzin Shenji sneered and said to the figure. The person who was reversed and summoned by her summoning technique was naturally Qishuang in the different space. Long before Shiamzin Shenji took off, Qishuang had made an agreement with her that once she was sucked into the different space by Obito, Shiamzin Shenji would reverse the summoning technique and summon him out after 15 minutes. Chapter 465, Interception. Hearing this, Qishuang hurriedly used the levitation technique to stabilize his falling momentum. Then he saw that Maingetsu Kizuki on the ground had locked up Meditarumi with the water prison technique and was crossing the frozen area he had left behind, fleeing to the edge of the battlefield. Without time to thank Shiamzin Shenji, Qishuang opened his right hand and saw the cold air condense, and immediately a wall of ice appeared beside him. In just a moment, he went into the ice wall and disappeared. Guessing what he was thinking, Shiamzin Shenji immediately looked at the ground, the direction where Maingetsu Kizuki fled. Maingetsu Kizuki had just gotten rid of the troublesome Kakuzu, and before he could be happy, he suddenly felt a sense of depression in his heart, as if he was being stared at by a beast. He instinctively looked back, but found that Kakuzu was still 100 meters away, out of reach. As for the strange witch in the sky, she was still in the sky, without any unusual movements, but a wall of ice fell from the sky out of thin air, which made him a little confused. Wait, ice wall. He stopped suddenly and suddenly realized something. Because there was only one person who could use ice escape near this battlefield. Unfortunately, it was too late. A familiar white figure rushed out from the ice under his feet and blocked his way. He recognized it at a glance. It was Qishuang. However, he couldn't figure out how Qishuang, who disappeared inexplicably, suddenly appeared here again. There was no time to talk to him. Qishuang used Ice Escape to intercept Manu and opened his right hand towards the spherical water prison. Ice Escape ice sealing technique. The cold air seeped out from the fingertips and the spherical water prison froze into a spherical ice lump the moment it came into contact with it. Fortunately, Manu decisively pulled away, otherwise he would have been frozen in it. Open. With another light shout, Qishuang controlled the chakra in the ice ball to continue the new changes. The ice ball cracked, revealing a beautiful woman in a blue dress. Hiss, I'm freezing to death. Taking this opportunity, Terumi Mei escaped from the trap, but she just took a few breaths of cold air and shivered a little. Seeing this, Qishuang hurriedly put her right hand on her shoulder and pulled out the ice escape chakra that had penetrated into her body. Only then did Terumi Mei feel that her body temperature returned to normal and she felt much more comfortable. Then, she asked Qishuang expectantly, is everything settled? Looking at the expectant eyes, Qishuang felt a little guilty for no reason. He sighed helplessly and said bitterly, I can't kill that guy, but he has promised to take people away from Kirigakure and will not harass us again. Now, as long as we solve the Hazuki faction, the war in the entire Kirigakure village can be completely settled. After that, he took a deep look at Hazuki Manayu not far away. Because of Nana Frost's sudden appearance, Maingetsu Hazuki failed to achieve his goal and was in a very bad mood. But he was not a reckless person after all, so he did not act rashly again. What's more, there were Kakuzu and the missing Uchiha Obito here, so he had plenty of time to sit back and watch the fight. Just as he mentioned Obito, Maingetsu immediately saw a vortex of void opening up next to Kakuzu, and Uchiha Obito, whose right face was covered with scars, walked out of it. Obito, didn't you trap that guy in your alternate dimension? How did he suddenly escape again? Kakuzu pointed to a man and a woman not far away and asked. Obito said with a dark face, I don't know why, that guy suddenly disappeared in my alternate dimension. It's as if he was suddenly summoned away by some force. Summon? Hearing this, the experienced Kakuzu seemed to realize something. Just now, an ice wall fell from the sky, and the guy named Nana Frost suddenly appeared at that time and stopped Maingetsu Hazuki. He guessed that the opponent was probably using the ice escape and teleportation to block Maingetsu. Because Maingetsu was at the ice escape field that Qishuang had left behind to deal with Scorpion. If the ice wall was used as the starting point for teleportation, there was no need to deliberately put it in the sky. But the opponent did it anyway, definitely not for fun. Moreover, he remembered that the location where the ice wall fell was exactly below the witch. In other words, the guy named Qishuang created the ice wall in the sky and then used the ice escape and teleportation, so the ice wall fell. But a person cannot appear in the sky out of thin air unless. Then, he looked at the Shyaks and Shenji floating in the air and murmured, could it be that the woman reversed the summoning technique and summoned that kid out? Hearing this, Obito was surprised. Can the summoning technique be used for reverse summoning? You ignorant boy. Kakuzu rolled his eyes at him and said, the summoning contract is a two-way effect, but because most summoned beasts do not have the ability to use summoning, in the eyes of ordinary people, summoned beasts are always the ones being summoned unilaterally. You kid are lucky. Today you met a guy who can use reverse summoning. Hearing this, Obito hurriedly glanced at the Miko in the sky and said in astonishment, you mean, the woman in the sky is not a human, but a summoned beast? Kakuzu said unhappily, what else do you think it is? When have you ever heard that people can sign a summoning contract with each other? Hearing this, Obito couldn't help but speechless. Because his attention was attracted by Zabuza and the others at that time, he did not see clearly where Nana Frost got such a Miko as a helper, so he always thought that it was a flying ninja. Only Kakuzu, who was responsible for guarding Nana Frost, saw the moment when the other party used the summoning technique, so he knew very well that the woman was not a human, but a summoned beast with a human form. Then, Kakuzu asked Obito again, what are you going to do next? Continue to consume, or temporarily retreat? He had seen Nana Frost's strength. It was definitely not an opponent that could be defeated in a short time. In addition, the other party had the ability to fly and could move freely. When the opponent saw that the situation was not good, he would directly take off into the air. They stood on the ground and could do nothing but worry, and it would be a waste of effort. Therefore, for him personally, he didn't want to fight anymore. Boom. Just when Uchihiro was about to answer, a loud noise came from the battlefield in the distance. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, but saw a small red sun exploded on the ground. The huge impact of the explosion shook the earth, causing it to rise and fall like waves. The houses that had already collapsed were turned into ashes the moment the little sun exploded. Even the houses that were a little further away and escaped the direct destruction of the explosion were still not spared from the impact of the explosion that followed. They collapsed completely like fallen leaves swept by a strong wind and disappeared with the wind. Obito sneered and said, "No more fighting. Let's sit down and watch a good show." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466, Retreat. Is that the tailed beast ball? Seeing this horrifying scene, whether it was Nanashino, Meditarumi, or Maingetsu on the other side, they were all horrified. Those who had experienced the battle for the 4th Mizukage immediately recognized that it was the scene of the explosion of the tailed beast ball. Especially Maingetsu, he was extremely frightened. No one understood the horror of the tailed beast ball better than him who had faced it directly. Facing this move, 99% of people had no chance of survival. At this moment, that terrifying tailed beast ball suddenly fell on the chaotic battlefield, and it was unknown how many people would be buried in it. This naturally included their ninjas of the Maingetsu line. But Maingetsu was also very clear that, because the runaway tailed beast was really uncontrollable, neither Terumi Hoshigaki nor their Maingetsu would use such indiscriminate attack weapons, unless it was absolutely necessary. What's more, at this time, the two tailed beasts of the Kirigakure were under the control of Maingetsu and the other under the control of Uchihiro. There was no possibility that Hoshigaki Terumi's group would use the tailed beasts. Thinking of this, he angrily looked at the man with scars on his right cheek, Uchihiro. At the same time, after excluding the possibility that the three major families used the tailed beasts, Nanashi also locked the suspect on Uchihiro. However, before they could take further action, the vibrations generated by the explosion of the tailed beast jade followed. Whoosh! The wind was howling, sand and rocks were flying, and it was so hard that everyone couldn't open their eyes at all, let alone talk. When the wind stopped completely, the entire ground seemed to have been peeled off by someone, and there was not even a single weed to be seen. Uchihiro. Whether it was Nanashi's side or Hazuki Manayu's side, they all looked at the man with scars on his right cheek angrily. "Have you forgotten the oath you just made so quickly?" Nanashi asked angrily. "I haven't forgotten. I will keep my promise and leave, but not now, but later." Uchihiro looked at him deeply and then said, "I once said that I prepared 3 great gifts for you. Of course, these gifts cannot be wasted. And what you see now is the second great gift." After that, he glanced at the place where the explosion just happened. Seeing that Qishuang looked unkind, he smiled playfully and said, "But to be precise, this gift is not from me. It comes from Konoha. It is a gift from the old guy Shimura Danzo to Kirigakure." Hearing this, Qishuang was stunned for a moment. Manu of Kazuna was also a little confused. Konoha only has one uncontrolled Ninetales, and it will never be used unless the village is in crisis. Now it has been sent thousands of miles to their Kirigakure. Although it can severely damage their ninja village, Konoha will never have the opportunity to take back the Ninetales. No matter how you look at it, this is not a good deal. However, Manu's doubts were immediately answered. The smoke and dust cleared, and a grey-white giant beast that looked like a slug appeared at the edge of the explosion. It was the 6-tailed rhino dog of their Kirigakure. 6-tailed? How could it be the 6-tailed? Manu cried out in a panic. No matter what, he could not imagine that there was a problem with the 6-tailed beast under the control of the Hazuki family. Why can't it be the 6-tailed beast? Obito looked at him with a playful look and mocked him unceremoniously. Could it be that you still expect Konoha to send the 9-tailed beast over? Kirigakure was in turmoil and was not well prepared, which gave Konoha the opportunity to take action. They had no need to use their only tailed beast. Ignoring Manu, who could not accept the reality, Obito looked at the young man in white on the other side and said proudly, "Even if you use Rin as a threat to force me to leave Kirigakure, what can you do? Kirigakure is destined to be destroyed today. You can never change this ending. Ha ha ha." After that, a cruel smile appeared on his face. Boom. Another small sun fell to the ground, and a terrifying explosion sounded from the distant battlefield. No one knows how many people died this time. Nanashi, Nanashi, Nanashi. I want to go back. I want to leave here. We must stop the Vulpix. Meditarumi tugged at his clothes, her eyes red, staring at him closely, her tone very anxious, and a little choked. At this moment, she no longer had the mind to entangle with Obito and the others here. She had to go back and take charge of the overall situation. There is no doubt that the tailed beasts are powerful. Even with sufficient preparations, it takes orderly command and a lot of manpower to seal a tailed beast. Now, the Vulpix suddenly appeared on the battlefield and launched an indiscriminate large-scale offensive. Caught off guard, the ninjas on all sides on the battlefield must have suffered countless casualties. Even, as Uchiha Obito said, it is still unknown whether Kirigakure will be destroyed. Therefore, stopping the Vulpix and sealing the Vulpix is the top priority at the moment. Seeing her sad look, Qishuang was very worried. Then he patted her shoulder and whispered to comfort her, "It's okay, I'm here. As long as I'm here, Kirigakure will not perish. I'll take you away now." However, before he finished speaking, he heard an angry voice from the attic not far away. "Manu, what are you still standing there for? Leave Meditarumi to me." Hearing this familiar voice, Manu Hazuki looked at it in surprise and replied, "Father, it's the Vulpix outside." No buts. Manu was interrupted by Masamune Hazuki before she finished speaking. He only heard him scolding with regret. "The Vulpix attacks indiscriminately. Our people died, and their people also died. We are still on the same starting line. As long as Meditarumi stays, we can overwhelm the Tarumi family and finally take advantage of the situation to kill the Hashigaki family. Do you understand? Hurry up and leave them to me." Masamune Hazuki, who was hiding in the attic, almost roared the last sentence. However, Nanashiro ignored him and used the levitation technique to take Meditarumi up to the sky. On the other side, Obito saw that he had no intention of stopping him. Regardless of whether the opponent could seal the Vulpix or not, his purpose of severely damaging Kirigakure had been achieved. With the sudden large-scale attack of the Vulpix alone, at least 50% of the Kirigakure ninjas on the battlefield would be killed or injured. He only needed to wait patiently for the opportunity to retrieve the Vulpix. This did not break the oath he made fallen. In the sky, Nanashiro thanked the Mako floating in the air. "Lady Shyang's and Shenji, I'm sorry to bother you today. I have urgent matters to deal with right now, so I won't play with you. Just walk around the village. Okay?" Shyang's and Shenji waved her hand nonchalantly and said, "Go and do your own thing." At the end, she added another sentence. "But don't forget, I'm not working for you for nothing." Qishuang nodded and said solemnly, "I haven't forgotten. When everything is settled, I will send you a thank you gift." Hearing this, Shyang's and Shenji smiled like a flower. Then, she looked at a figure rising rapidly below and sneered, "It seems that they don't want to let you go so easily." Chapter 467 Steaming. Meditarumi looked in the direction of the sound and saw a rapidly expanding figure flying up. "Is that Main Jetsukizuki?" Although the other person's face was a little strange, she could barely recognize that it was Main Jetsukizuki. "How can he also fly? I've never heard of it." Meditarumi opened her mouth in surprise. "No, get out of the way." Nana Frost screamed, and while increasing the flying altitude, she reminded loudly, "That's not the real Main Jetsukizuki, that's Main Jetsukizuki's special clone. It's the second generation's ultimate move burst danger steaming power." Hearing this, Shyam's-in Shenji's smile froze on her face, and she immediately retreated far away. There are many talented people in the ninja world, and there are always some people who, through their own efforts, create terrifying killing moves that are remembered by people. For example, the first generation of Hokages would release, the second generation of Tsuchikages dust release, the third generation of Raikages lightning release chakra mode, and so on. This violent steaming power is one of the few killer moves that even the immortal Shins in Shenji will remember. It is a water escape technique that uses the explosion of water vapor to produce terrifying killing power. Although her immortal physique will not be killed in one blow, if she is hit by a violent steaming power head-on, she will also be unable to withstand it. It is said that the second generation Tsuchikage of the Hidden Rock Village was burned by the steam of this violent steaming power and could never recover. This is why he had to wrap his whole body with bandages. Being held in Qishuang's arms, looking at the figure that was expanding more and more, Meditarumi said in surprise, "It is said that burst danger steaming power requires extremely high attainments in water escape to practice, so since the second generation, no one has been able to reproduce this water escape secret technique. I didn't expect that Maingetsu Kizuki, who we thought was a master of swordsmanship, actually had such a trump card. It's really surprising." Qishuang tried his best to increase his flying altitude, but unfortunately Maingetsu Kizuka's special clone's expansion speed and flying speed were too fast, and he couldn't get rid of it at all. Fortunately, because the clone's volume expanded, the wind resistance increased, and the opponent's flying speed gradually slowed down when closing the distance with them. By the time the opponent's flight completely stopped, its volume had expanded to the size of a floor of more than 10 meters. Oh no, it's going to explode. Seeing it stop moving, Qishuang couldn't help but jump. At this moment, there was still a distance of more than 10 meters between the two of them and the clone, but this distance did not give him a sense of security at all. Because judging from the size of the clone, the impact range of the explosion was at least over 100 meters. Although his chakra coat was not afraid of the impact of the water vapor explosion, if he inhaled the scorching hot water vapor produced by the explosion, he would also be seriously injured or even die. And without the protection of the chakra coat, the result forming can be imagined. Then, he formed a seal with one hand and transformed the chakra into ice. Ice release, ice sealing technique. In just a moment, Meditarumi, who was held in his arms, felt a piercing cold, and then a layer of crystal ice climbed up her hands and feet and quickly spread to the surroundings. Boom. Just when Qishuang had just frozen themselves, the huge full moon clone exploded, and a terrifying ghost face appeared in the steam. The white water vapor launched a fierce attack on the surroundings like a wave. Then, a huge force hit the ice layer on their bodies. Fortunately, the ice blocks made by Qishuang were very hard, and the explosive impact was not the only attack effect of burst and danger steaming power. The impact at that moment only blew away the ice blocks where the two people were, but failed to blow them apart. However, water vapor will release heat when it is cooled. Another attack effect of this move is to create a large amount of water vapor and burn the opponent with heat. The hot water vapor hit the outside of the ice layer, causing the ice layer to melt quickly. In just a moment, the thickness of the entire ice layer was reduced by nearly half. We can't let it explode anymore. Qishuang frowned as she looked at the full moon clone whose volume was gradually shrinking due to the release of water vapor through the ice layer. The core of this move burst and danger steaming power is that special clone. The surface of the clone is a layer of special oil, and inside is water. Taking advantage of the property of oil that easily absorbs heat, the clone generates heat by friction with the air when moving at high speed. The heat-absorbing oil can heat the water inside the clone, thus forming water vapor, causing the clone to expand and grow. Once the clone expands to the limit, the oil on the surface of the body can no longer bind the water vapor in the body, and the clone will explode. However, the clone will not be destroyed. Instead, it will shrink back to its original shape due to the release of water vapor. Because of the release of a large amount of high-temperature steam, the clone cools down sharply, causing the moisture in the air to condense, and then generate moisture to remain in the clone. When the clone moves quickly again, the moisture in the body will evaporate again due to frictional heat, and finally explode. This cycle repeats and becomes a kind of infinite explosion water escape ninjutsu. Of course, this is only theoretically infinite. After all, every explosion of the clone will cause chakra consumption. After multiple explosions, chakra needs to be replenished to maintain the existence of the clone. But Qishuang has no time to entangle with main Jetsu Kizuna here, because the six-tailed beast is rampant on the battlefield. One more second of time wasted will increase more casualties on the battlefield. But the flying speed of that special clone is faster than his. If he doesn't deal with it as soon as possible, he will not be able to get rid of main Jetsu Kizuna's entanglement. Then, he unfrozen the surface of his body, and while making hand seals, he continued to fly towards the battlefield with Meditarumi. Want to leave? That's not that easy. Ahem. Main Jetsu on the ground saw this, and hurriedly chased after him, controlling his clone to catch up. I didn't expect that main Jetsu had such a trick up his sleeve. On the ground, Obito, who was watching the battle, was also full of emotion. The terrifying steam explosion covered an area of hundreds of meters. If they hadn't flown into the sky to chase Qishuang, they would have been affected on the ground. Ta ta ta. At this moment, there was a rustling sound from the ground, like a pile of scattered prayer beads falling on the floor. Obito spread out his palm, and immediately, ice crystals fell into his palm. That guy used ice escape again. He said subconsciously. No, it's not ice escape, it's hail. Kakuzu next to him shook his head while holding an ice crystal and said solemnly, this is a water vapor produced by the explosion of the clone. It rises to a certain height and condenses into hail when it encounters cold. Above the sky, the greater the height difference from the ground, the lower the temperature. If water vapor wants to condense into hail, it must rise to a certain height. But water vapor dissipates heat very quickly. If it is not hot enough, it cannot rise to the height that is enough to condense hail. In other words, the water vapor produced by the explosion of the clone just now has an unimaginable temperature. Just as Obito was about to ask for relevant information again, a huge pitcher plant-like plant grew out from next to them. What are you going to do next, Obito? Black Zetsu's hoarse voice came from the slowly opening serrated leaves. Let's watch the excitement first, and then prepare to capture the Vulpix. Obito waved his hand nonchalantly. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something, and hurriedly whispered to Beiju, let your clone go to the prison. The second generation surname is Gui Deng. If he doesn't keep a copy of the killer move burst danger steaming power for his family, it would be unreasonable. Because of the principle of confidentiality, ordinary people may not know it, but the major families should still have corresponding records. This is the heritage. Chapter 468 Cooling. On the ground, Manzuki Kizuki chased and controlled his clone to launch another round of attack on Qishuang and the others in the sky. Because of the heat generated by friction with the air, the clone expanded again. Water style, iron cannon bomb. Meditarumi opened her mouth and spit out a high pressure water bomb at Manzuki's clone that was chasing her rapidly from behind. However, the clone was extremely agile and flexible, and she spit out 3 water bombs in a row, but failed to hit it. It just hit the ground empty and smashed a lot of roofs. Fortunately, this is not Meditarumi's territory. No matter how many were smashed, she would not feel bad. Fly fast. That guy is going to explode again. Looking at the clone behind her, whose flying speed was decreasing, but whose body was getting bigger and bigger, Meditarumi screamed. Don't worry, I have found a way to deal with it. Giving her a reassuring smile, Qishuang transformed her chakra into ice, a tribute cold air that seeped out of her body surface. Ice style, needle rain technique. Then, the cold air floating in the air quickly condensed and turned into large thousand-sized thousand bones nearly 1 foot long. They were densely packed, covering an area of nearly 100 meters in radius. Go. With a command, Qishuang controlled countless thousands of ice and shot them at the Manu clone behind him. HMPH, naive. Seeing that his spell covered a wide area and his clone could not avoid it at all, Manu immediately let his clone give up evasion and rushed straight towards the two. Although his clone looked like a balloon, it would not explode prematurely due to the opponent's attack, nor would it be damaged by the opponent's attack. Because oil, like water, has a strong aggregation. This is also the reason why the clone will recover again after releasing the water vapor explosion. Then, under his mocking eyes, the sparkling thousands of ice in the sky shot at his clone like a rainstorm. The result was just as he had expected earlier. Those thousands of ice penetrated his clone, but that was all, and it did not explode his clone. Idiot, your trick doesn't work at all. Seeing that Manu's clone was intact, Terumi Mei cursed anxiously. That may not be the case. Nana Qishuang turned her head and took a look and said confidently, "Take a closer look. That's not just a little bit." Terumi Mei's words were stuck in her throat and she couldn't say it anymore. Because she found that the flying speed of Hazuki Manu's clone seemed to have increased and the size seemed to have become smaller. Looking closely again, she found that most of the Ice Thousand books that penetrated the clone were more than half the size. So that's how it is. Noticing this, she immediately realized it. This trick of the second generation of Mizukage is not known much by ordinary Miss Ninja, but their major families secretly left a lot of information. Therefore, she knew that the characteristic of this trick is heat absorption explosion. As long as the heat absorption process can be blocked, this trick is just a special clone with more flexibility. Therefore, when many people think about how to crack this trick, the first thing they think of is to restrict the movement of the clone, so that it cannot generate heat through friction. But the clone created by the second generation's move is made of a special oil with a strong polymerization property, and it will not be easily damaged. In addition, its original size is not large, and under the control of the caster, it has a strong mobility. It is very difficult to even capture its movement trajectory, let alone restrict its mobility. Therefore, the idea of restricting the activity of the clone and cracking this move has become empty talk. But Qishuang has a unique idea. Starting from the heat absorbed by the clone, he uses the characteristics of ice escape refrigeration to neutralize the heat of the water vapor in the clone so that it condenses into water again, thus eliminating the crisis of the clone exploding. This is also the reason why those Ice Thousand books will shrink by one size after penetrating the clone. Because the heat of the water vapor is neutralized and condensed into water again, the size of the clone begins to shrink, the wind resistance becomes smaller, and the speed naturally increases again. On the ground, Manzuki Kizuki, who has been following, also quickly discovered the abnormality of the clone. The flying speed of the clone began to increase strangely, and the size began to shrink slowly. It was completely different from the normal state of casting a spell. It was almost like it was turned upside down. It was at this time that he found that the limbs of the clone became more and more stiff, and the movements became more and more difficult to control. He suddenly realized something. The clone is frozen. The oil on the surface of the clone's body naturally cannot freeze, but the water inside the clone can. Only in this way can it be explained why the clone's volume did not expand but shrank, and the speed did not decrease but increased. Originally, after seeing Nana Qishuang use ice escape to freeze the water escape ninjutsu of Scorpion and Kakuzu, Manu deliberately kept a watchful eye on this. Even though the speed of the clone was faster than their flying speed, he never dared to let the clone get too close, just for fear that it would freeze the water in the clone's body. Who knew that, despite all the precautions, he was still hit? It should be that the heat was neutralized by the cold ice and the cold air accumulated, which caused the water in the clone to begin to freeze. Fortunately, this freezing process was the result of the gradual accumulation of cold air, not the direct effect of the opponent's ice escape. Otherwise, his clone would be completely scrapped. You know, this move, Burst Danger Steaming Power, is the second generation of Mizukage's ultimate move, which requires a lot of chakra to perform. In order to perform this move, Manu has used up nearly half of his chakra, and if this clone is scrapped, for his own safety, he dare not create this kind of clone for a long time. At this time, Manu of Hazuki had no idea that Nana Frost did not want to use ice escape to freeze his clone, but because the clone's movement was too flexible and it always kept a certain distance, the cold air created by ice escape had little chance to touch the opponent, so Nana Frost chose to use a large-scale ice escape ninjutsu, make it unavoidable, and use the cold air of ice escape ninjutsu to neutralize the heat of water vapor. Although he was very sorry that he could not freeze the clone directly, but he solved the crisis of water vapor explosion, which was also the result he wanted. Come down. Seeing the plight of the clone, Manu of Hazuki immediately controlled the increasingly stiff clone to slow down, exited the area covered by the thousand ice, and returned to his side. One person and one clone quickly passed by the ground, still chasing the two people in the sky. As for the water that had already condensed in the clone, he was not worried at all. as long as the clone no longer accumulated the cold air of the thousand ices and moved quickly to generate heat by friction, the ice would naturally melt. Soon, his clone absorbed heat and expanded again. Unfortunately, when he tried to let the clone get close to the opponent again, another piece of ice shot down from the sky, consuming all the heat accumulated by the clone. As the explosions on the battlefield became clearer, the three chased and fled all the way, and soon left the Gui Deng family's residence and entered the battlefield. Chapter 469 Violation of Orders. However, the noisy fighting sounds earlier had long disappeared, replaced by the exclamations and screams of the ninjas. The ground was full of wounds and corpses. The ruins of the buildings that were originally used as shelters disappeared, and only huge explosion pits with a diameter of a kilometer remained on the ground, exposing the yellow-brown soil layer below. Even many underground water veins were pierced by the explosion, and streams of blue fountains mixed with the blood and corpses on the ground, forming pools of dirty blood. Mainjetsu, look at this land. Do you really want to entangle with us again? Looking at the miserable situation on the ground, Nanashi shouted angrily and descended rapidly with Meditarumi. Seeing them land, Mainjetsu, who was about to take action, stopped when he heard this and stood on the edge of a huge explosion pit with his clone in silence. There are too many dead people. As early as when he saw the Vulpix appear on the battlefield, he expected that many people would die, but guesses are always just guesses, and they will never be more shocking than witnessing it with his own eyes. Because the Vulpix appeared too suddenly, no one had prepared a plan to deal with it. As a result, its appearance made the entire chaotic battlefield even more chaotic. Coupled with its huge size, it completely ignored the attacks of most ninjas, and a random blow could take away countless lives. The explosion of the tailed beast ball even affected a range of nearly 1,000 meters, and many people did not even have a chance to escape, and died directly in it. Caught off guard, it was like a wolf entering a flock of sheep, and it was simply a one-sided massacre. Judging from the density of corpses on the battlefield, in just a few minutes, the casualties caused by the Vulpix far exceeded the total casualties of the three forces during this period of time. It was really terrible. At this moment, Manu's heart began to waver. Should he really continue to follow his father's orders and capture Meditarumi? On the other side, Nanashi put Meditarumi down and anxiously told her, go back and collect the remaining troops quickly, don't get entangled with Suzuki and the others anymore, and evacuate the battlefield first. As for Vulpix, leave it to me alone to deal with it. After saying that, he looked solemnly at the grey-white slug that was venting wildly in the ruins not far away. Meditarumi, who was about to turn around and leave, stopped when she heard his last sentence and hurriedly reminded, can you do it alone? Don't mess around. That's Vulpix. Nanashi waved his hand, staring at the giant beast in the distance and said solemnly, I don't know the special sealing technique to seal the tailed beast, but with my ability, it should be no problem to temporarily suppress its activities. Really? The blue-skirted beauty looked at him in surprise. Qishuang rolled her eyes at her and said unhappily, do I look like an idiot who is courting death? Okay, stop talking nonsense. Go back and gather up the remaining troops and prepare the sealers. Bring them over to help seal the six-tailed beast. One of the purposes of Uchihirobito and the others coming to the hidden mist villages for the tailed beast in our village. The three-tailed beast in the fourth Hokage is already under his control. The six-tailed beast cannot be lost again. Upon hearing this, Meditarumi's face changed and then nodded solemnly to him, whispering, then you be careful, I'll go back and prepare. After that, she turned around and left without looking back and disappeared at the edge of the battlefield in a few ups and downs. Mainjetsu Hazuki on the opposite side wanted to stop them, but seeing the corpses all over the ground, she finally disobeyed her father's order. Because, among the corpses on the ground, in addition to the ninjas of Terumi Hashigaki's line, there were also ninjas of the Hazuki line. He clearly realized that the most important thing at the moment was not to capture Meditarumi and continue to entangle her, but to clean up the remaining troops like the other party did and stop the Vulpix from destroying the village. Moreover, the sooner the better. The sooner the Vulpix is subdued, the fewer casualties on the battlefield will be. Then, he gently formed a set of hand seals and shouted softly, release. He immediately saw the water and oil clones beside him melt quickly like heated chocolate, and finally turned into a stream, quietly merging into his liquid body. This battle will be temporarily terminated. After we have dealt with the Vulpix, we will decide the outcome. Ahem. Manzuki Hazuki coughed twice, took a deep look at the young man in white opposite him, and then left quickly. He was going to go over there to clean up the remaining troops of his side. Qishuang didn't say much when he saw it, but he was secretly relieved in his heart. The opponent's strength is not weak, and burst danger steaming power is a killer move that even he is afraid of. If he has to deal with Manzuki Hazuki's attack when dealing with the Vulpix, it will be too difficult for him. At this moment, a silver bell-like laughter came from the sky. Boy, the six-tailed beast is not an ordinary beast. You're in trouble now. Qishuang looked up and saw that it was Shans and Shenji who followed him to watch the fun. How do you plan to deal with it? The white-clothed shrine maiden lazily lay in the air and asked him playfully. With a thought, he mobilized the natural energy to create buoyancy around his body. Qishuang floated up to the sky slowly but quickly with the levitation technique. He said solemnly, of course, violence is used to fight violence, and force is used to suppress force. The tailed beasts are too large. Even their basic strength is hundreds of times stronger than that of humans. In addition, their skin is thick, their chakra volume is ridiculously large, and their chakra resistance is very high. Ordinary ninjutsu is basically useless against them. Qishuang's only ability to suppress the six-tailed beast is the Senjutsu. However, to use the Senjutsu, he needs to enter the Sage mode first. But to enter the Sage mode, he still needs some time to absorb the natural energy around him so that the natural energy accumulation in his body can break through the critical point. Then, he used the levitation technique to stay in the sky where no one could disturb him. He put his hands together, closed his eyes, and forgot the screams and explosions on the ground. His spirit, energy, and soul merged into one, entering a state of emptiness, and began to absorb the natural energy around him. Then, in his perception field, countless free natural energies, like iron filings attracted by a magnet, gathered towards him, and quickly poured into his body. Just like the long-dried earth finally ushered in the moisture of rain, the grass and trees began to sprout, and a growing force was gradually born in his body. Abato, our guess has become a reality. That guy really knows how to use fairy arts. On the ground, looking at the figure in the sky, Black Zetsu's tone became a little solemn. With the powerful perception of White Zetsu, he could clearly detect that a large amount of natural energy was being absorbed into Nanami's body. There was no doubt that it was a sign that the other party was about to launch a fairy art. As far as he knew, the essence of fairy arts was a kind of ability to increase ninjutsu, physical arts, and various aspects. The strength of fairy arts naturally varied from person to person. The stronger the caster is, the stronger the magic is. Now, that guy's already difficult enough when he doesn't use magic, and with the amplification effect of magic, it will definitely be terrifying. A shot of the tailed beast ball is no different from a nuclear weapon, and it can easily destroy a mountain. Although this move seems cheap in the later stages of the battle, no one can compare with it except for the last few monsters. The destructive power per unit area of dust release is definitely stronger than that of the tailed beast ball, but the attack range is incomparable. Under this shot, basically no one can escape the attack range, and there are even fewer who can withstand it. Chapter 470 Curious. Senjutsu. After hearing this, Obito concentrated his Sharingan's power and looked at it, frowned and said, "Why can't my Sharingan see anything?" Beizetsu said, "The so-called serenity is a technique that incorporates natural energy, and natural energy is everywhere, but most people don't have the ability to sense natural energy, so they can't detect the changes in natural energy. Although your Sharingan can see the flow of chakra, it can't see the changes in natural energy." Hearing this, Uchiha Obito suddenly realized, so that's how it is. No wonder my Sharingan couldn't see the secret of how he lifted my illusion. It turns out he used natural energy. Recalling the previous battle, he finally found out the reason why illusions were ineffective on Nanashiro, and knew what the unknown force that interfered with his illusions was. Black Zetsu continued, with his original strength, combined with the power of the celestial art, it shouldn't be a problem to deal with that Vulpix. If we want to capture the Vulpix in the chaos, I'm afraid we don't have much chance. For safety's sake, I suggest you stay away from that guy." As he spoke, Zetsu gathered the large serrated leaves on both sides of his body, making a gesture of retreating at any time. Seeing this, Kakuzu said contemptuously, "What a coward, no fun at all." At this time, he had already retracted the 4 mask clones into his body, and once again put on the windbreaker with a black background and red clouds. "What are you going to do, Obito?" He looked at the man next to him with scars on his right face. Obito said nonchalantly, "No matter how powerful the power is, it's a waste of effort if you can't hit the target. I'd like to see what the legendary power of the celestial being looks like. What do you think?" As he spoke, he turned around and looked at the green-eyed man. "Like you, I'm also curious about how strong the power of the celestial being is," Kakuzu said, looking at the white figure on the dome. "I remember that you fought with the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, didn't you? How come you didn't see his magic?" Obito looked him up and down with interest. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, was known as the god of ninja, like the reincarnation of the Six Paths Sage. What he said was not just that he was very strong, but that he really knew magic and was a real sage. If Kakuzu had fought with him, but had not seen the power of the sage, then the meaning behind this is very intriguing. Hearing this, Kakuzu looked at him deeply and said solemnly, "If you really met Senju Hashirama himself, you will understand how powerful he is. In the past, I was ordered by the top leaders of Kirigakure to assassinate him. He didn't even do it himself, and only used a wood-style clone to defeat me. If he hadn't shown mercy, a wood-style clone alone would have been enough to kill me. As for the immortal technique, Kakuzu didn't say anything more, but a helpless and bitter laugh came from under the mask. He wanted to see the other party's immortal technique, but unfortunately he was not qualified. Hearing this, Uchiha Obito's heart sank to the bottom. Kakuzu was self-reliant in his strength, and was the oldest ninja in their organization. But even such a ninja was impressed by the strength of Senju Hashirama. It is hard to imagine how strong Senju Hashirama was in the past. Fortunately, Senju Hashirama is dead, and the people who can match him are also dead. He no longer had to worry about these former strong men hindering his plans. On the other side, seeing the young patriarch return safely, the senior members of Terumi's faction were very excited. Unfortunately, the excitement only lasted for less than half a minute. Because of the indiscriminate attacks of the Vulpix, countless casualties were caused on the front line, and there were constant reports of the collapse of the defense line. The situation was extremely bad. Everyone was really not happy. Pass the order down. Order everyone to withdraw from the battlefield. Before returning to the command room, Terumi hurriedly gave orders to her subordinates on the way. "But sir, if everyone retreats, who will contain the runaway Vulpix? If it chases us and breaks into our base, our damage will be even more serious," someone said worriedly. Terumi turned around and rolled her eyes at him, then cursed him in frustration. "I told you to retreat, but I didn't tell you to run away without caring about your lives. Let some powerful jonin stay behind to cover the retreat and hold the beast back for a while, and someone will take over to deal with the Vulpix. Now, send 2 more people to notify Hoshigaki to gather all the ninjas who are good at sealing techniques and prepare the techniques and tools to seal the Vulpix. We have to seal the Vulpix again." After venting her anger, Terumi felt much better and then disappeared around the corner of the corridor with everyone. Hoshigaki's side, because they had previously contracted their defenses, suffered much less casualties from the Vulpix than the other 2 sides. However, that was all. The destructive power of the tailed beasts was too terrible. In just a short while, at least 40% of the ninjas under Hoshigaki's command were lost. "Kisame, didn't you say that your friend would help us gain final control of the Hidden Mist Village? Why didn't you inform us in advance about the important intelligence of the Vulpix rampage?" In the command room, Kiichi Hoshigaki was furious after receiving the continuous reports of casualties from the front line. Nearly 40% of the ninjas belonging to the Hoshigaki family were gone so suddenly that he couldn't calm down. If they had known this information in advance, they would have prepared early and there would not have been such a big loss. Master Kiichi, according to the intelligence personnel stationed in the Hazuki family, the Vulpix rampage was caused by the ruthless hands of the Konoha, not my friend. In the command room, another shark-faced man with a huge weapon, wrapped in bandages, bowed his head and replied, Konoha. Kiichi Hishigaki's eyes were about to spit fire when he heard it. With a bang, he kicked over the desk with the map in front of him and scared the people around him into silence. Whether it was Hishigaki or Terumi Hazuki, they deployed intelligence personnel on the edge of the central island to prevent the other 4 villages from taking advantage of the fire. Unfortunately, they still didn't expect that Konoha didn't send troops from outside to interfere, but instead started from inside and released the Vulpix from their Kirigakure. Are all the Kirigakure members dead? How can they not even keep a watch on the Chinkriki? Kiichi Hishigaki continued to curse, but his target was Kirigakure. Because since the Kirigakure coup, the Vulpix has been controlled by the Kirigakure. Now that the Vulpix has been released by Konoha, it is obviously the fault of Kirigakure's people, causing them to suffer along with it. After venting, Kiichi Hishigaki's anger subsided a lot, and the subordinates next to him hurried forward and asked, Sir, what should we do next? Retreat, retreat, retreat. Kiichi Hishigaki yelled repeatedly, and added, let the powerful Jonin contain and cover, and withdraw the troops. Yes. Then, a ninja quickly left the command room. Chapter 471 Shaken. On the battlefield, the closer Maingetsu Hazuki got to the center of the battlefield, the more corpses there were on the ground. There were even many corpses that were only charcoal and human-shaped ashes. They were obviously the dead who were hit head-on by the tailed beast Jade. The battle was too brutal. It was far beyond his imagination. Many ninjas fled in panic, and even forgot about the blood feud between each other, and only thought about escaping. The ninjas of Hishigaki Terumi's line ran into him, the young patriarch of the Hazuki family, and just pretended not to see him, and hurriedly passed by without paying any attention. If it were the past, I'm afraid they would have surrounded him immediately. Fortunately, some ninjas remained rational and were doing their best to contain the 6-tailed beast in front, so that the weaker companions would have a chance to escape, so as not to cause the whole scene to collapse completely. Even so, in the absence of unified command and response plan, what they could do was very limited, and they just threw attacks at the 6-tailed beast randomly. However, the 3 ninjas had fought for several hours on the battlefield and were exhausted. Their chakra was almost exhausted. Their attacks fell on the Vulpix like drizzle, and it was not taken seriously at all. Go to hell, monster. A ninja roared, using the chakra that he had accumulated with great difficulty to perform a lightning ninjutsu. A blue lightning fell from the sky and hit the Vulpix's head accurately, but the Vulpix was still unscathed, and there was not even a trace left on its grey-white skin. How could it be? The killing move that was prepared with great difficulty still had no effect, and the man immediately lost his will to fight. Because of his sudden attack, the Vulpix, which had not noticed him at first, finally focused on him. Knowing the rotten wolf, the Vulpix's mouth bulged slightly, and then sprayed a mouthful of white mucus at it. The man was frightened and stood still. In just a moment, all the mist ninjas in the area of more than 10 meters who had not yet escaped were covered in white mucus. Then, the people around saw smoke rising from the mucus, and those covered by the mucus quickly turned into a pool of pus like ice and snow under the scorching sun. Another companion died. Despite this, the rest of the mist ninjas did not stop their offensive. They continued to harass the Vulpix without stopping, so that it could not chase the large force evacuating the battlefield. From the moment they chose to be the last, they were mentally prepared to die. Whether it was Hishigaki Terumi or Hazuki, they were doing their best to delay the Vulpix's pace, and had no energy to attack each other. Not long after, Hazuki Maingetsu ran into a team that had just withdrawn. Judging from the emblems they carried, they should be ninjas from their Hazuki line. However, everyone was injured, staggering, and looked embarrassed, no different from the refugees fleeing. Greetings, young clan leader. Seeing him, several people hurriedly saluted. Man U of Ghost Light stopped them and asked anxiously, how many of us are still ahead and have not retreated? One person said with a sad face, we don't know very well. We only know that there are a lot of wounded. Many of them are lying on the battlefield, unable to move at all, and were directly trampled to death by the 6 tails. Those who can still move freely are also escorting the wounded, which leads to a very slow retreat speed. As he was speaking, another small sun fell to the ground. "Get down. Man, you of ghost light," exclaimed, and immediately pulled several people to lie on the ground. Boom. The small sun exploded with a loud bang, and the dazzling light made people unable to open their eyes, as if even the sun in the sky was slightly inferior. Then, several people felt a violent vibration from the ground, and then a strong wind blew on their backs. If they hadn't held onto the exposed boulders on the ground tightly, they would have been blown away by the impact of the explosion. Fortunately, the tailed beast Jade was still some distance away from them, and was not directly affected by the explosion. Otherwise they would have no chance of survival. Ahem. The impact stopped. Mainjutsu Kizuki quickly stood up and told several people, "You guys hurry up and leave here. I'll go to the front to take a look." After that, he took off and went away quickly. This war has completely gone out of the control of their three families, and the casualties are too numerous to count. He couldn't imagine whether the Hidden Mist village could be rebuilt under such a difficult situation. At this moment, he couldn't help but recall what Nanashiro said to him before the war, that this war should be stopped. Continuing it would not benefit anyone. However, when he thought about taking power from his father, he couldn't help but hesitate again. How should I choose? Soon, Mainjutsu Kizuki arrived at the battlefield centered on the Vulpix. "The young clan leader is here. The young clan leader is here." His arrival was like a shot of adrenaline into everyone's hearts, and the ninjas of the Kizuki clan cheered. However, Hashiga Kitarumi's group felt a little disappointed. There was no doubt that Mainjutsu Hazuki was powerful, but they had no strong men to support them. Compared with the two, they were inevitably a little depressed. "All the Jonins, join me and lead the Vulpix to a sparsely populated area. The rest of you should hurry up and evacuate the wounded." Without having time to greet everyone, Mainjutsu Hazuki hurriedly issued an order. He once again used water and oil to separate a clone from his body that was 80% similar to himself, like a 6 or 7-year-old child. It was a special clone created to launch the violent danger steaming power. Facing the order of the young clan leader, the ninjas of Mainjutsu Hazuki's group had no objection and accepted the arrangement very obediently. Hashiga Kitarumi's group hesitated for a moment, but still tried their best to cooperate with Mainjutsu Hazuki to lead the Vulpix away, and did not deliberately sing a different tune. After all, this was not the time to turn against each other. Whoosh! At this moment, a black and purple chakra ball gathered again in front of the mouth of the Vulpix, and it exuded a terrifying wave that made people's heart palpitate. "The tailed beast ball is going to explode again," someone screamed, his voice trembling. Everyone present could hear the fear in his heart. However, no one dared to laugh at him, because they were also afraid. Many ninjas who had only heard of the tailed beasts, but had never seen them, saw them in person today. But this is definitely a terrifying experience that they don't want to repeat again in their lives. The tailed beasts are really too terrifying. A casual tailed beast ball can easily destroy a hill. Any ninjutsu seems pale and powerless in front of such a terrifying attack. Offense and defense are all ineffective. What's more terrifying is that the direct explosion range of the tailed beast ball covers nearly 1,000 meters. Once they are locked and attacked, they don't even have a chance to escape. Because no one has such speed to escape the explosion range of the tailed beast ball in an instant. "All of you step back, let me do it." Man, you saw this with a serious expression on his face. He immediately gave orders to the besieged people and directed the clone beside him to rush forward. Chapter 472, Restraint. Tailed beast ball was too terrifying, and Manu would never let the Vulpix continue to use such a move. As the clone moved quickly, friction with the air generated heat, water evaporated into steam, and the volume expanded rapidly. When it flew in front of the Vulpix, the clone was already more than 10 meters high and on the verge of explosion. Fortunately, the move of the tailed beast ball required a certain amount of time to accumulate power and could not be released instantly, which gave Manu the opportunity to stop it. Many Jonins around also tried to stop the Vulpix when they saw it accumulating chakra balls, but their attacks were not taken seriously by the Vulpix at all, and they could not interrupt the process of its condensing the tailed beast ball. "Back off." Manu gave a final reminder and then hurriedly retreated. The other Mist Ninjas also gave up the attack and retreated one after another. The Vulpix didn't understand why, but it was still a little anxious. It was just that condensing the tail beast ball required it to concentrate its energy, and it couldn't move at will, so it could only watch the huge clone rushing towards it. Originally, it could have chosen to give up condensing the tail beast ball and avoid the upcoming unknown attack, but it had been imprisoned in the hidden mist village for countless years and was already full of anger. At this moment, it only wanted to destroy this hated village and kill all these hateful mist ninjas. Therefore, it gave up the idea of evasion and only concentrated on accumulating chakra, wanting to withstand the unknown attack and then use the tail beast ball to blow up these mist ninjas. Explode. Mainjutsu controlled the clone to stick close to the even larger body of the Vulpix, and then with a thought, he detonated the clone that had reached its limit before the Vulpix's tail beast ball could be successfully condensed. Boom. The clone exploded, white steam gushed out, and the huge impact force caused the Vulpix to stagger and almost fall to the ground. Although it barely stabilized its position, the tail beast ball that was about to be completed was completely shattered by the fierce air wave. However, this was just the beginning. A steam bomb exploded right next to it. In addition to the huge impact force that made its brain dizzy, there was also a scorching air wave that made it uncomfortable. It screamed in pain and retreated repeatedly. Even with the thick skin and flesh of the tailed beasts, it could not ignore it. Little brat of the Hazuki family, I remember you. Today I must turn you into a pool of pus. The six-tailed rhino looked at the full moon not far away and roared loudly in anger. Water style, strong acid bubble. It opened its huge mouth and spit out a large piece of colorful foam in the sun. Compared with the moves such as the tail beast ball that require the accumulation of a large amount of chakra, it does not take much effort to perform other moves. That is a ninjutsu that integrates its own strong acid mucus into the water style bubble. In addition to the explosion effect itself, it also has the ability of strong acid corrosion. Those who are hit will die extremely painfully. Quickly retreat, don't touch those bubbles. Manzuki Kizuna shouted while controlling his shrunken clone to bypass the bubble group at a very fast speed and attack the Vulpix behind him again. At this moment, a mist ninja stood up. Don't panic, I have a way to deal with this trick. Water style, cutting rain. After he quickly formed a seal, a light rain began to fall from the sky. However, it was not ordinary rain, but a water style secret technique, which was specially created to restrain the ninjutsu such as bubble in the hidden mist village. It can offset the chakra in the bubble ninjutsu, making the opponent's bubble ineffective. Even for other ninjutsu, this move has a strong restraining effect. Patter. The light rain fell, and the large bubble bomb that the Vulpix had just created immediately became a dud. After being drenched by the rain, it disappeared silently in the air. Damn it. Vulpix was furious when he saw it. There is a series of bubble-type water escape ninjutsu in the hidden mist village. It was developed by the mist ninja a long time ago, after studying its attack methods. After creating similar attack methods, they also developed a technique to restrain bubble in order to suppress it. Now, seeing such a technique again, it is really angry. Helplessly, it had to give up using other bubble attack methods and spit out a large piece of white mucus at everyone. Knowing Wolf Decay, it has a body like a slug, and it also has the innate ability of spitting acidic mucus like a slug. With this acidic mucus, it can corrode any tangible object, which is no less than the dissolution escape of the Terumi clan. Get out of the way. Someone reminded loudly. But the size of the Vulpixes are after all like a small mountain, and the coverage area is tens of meters wide when it sprays casually. Some people were unable to dodge and were immediately hit, then fell to the ground like mud and turned into a pool of pus. At this time, Manu's clone generated heat through rapid movement and friction, and the water vapor in its body accumulated to the limit and once again rushed towards Vulpix. Get out of here. The furious Vulpix raised its six tails and fanned at the balloon-like clone. Knowing that the clone's power was not as strong as Vulpix, Manu detonated the steam clone the moment the clone was hit. Boom. Vulpix was blown to dust again, and even its tail was slightly red. It was burned by the steam. It was burning with anger and immediately rushed towards the group of people of Manu and the ghost lamp. Although it knew that these people deliberately wanted to lead it away and reduce casualties, it had no choice because it could not ignore the explosion of the clone of the kid from the ghost lamp family. Just when Manu and the group of people of the ghost lamp restrained Vulpix, as more and more natural energy was absorbed, Qishuang felt a sense of fullness in his body. He felt that he was getting stronger every minute and every second. I don't know how much time has passed, maybe 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or even 10 minutes. He felt that the natural energy accumulated in his body had finally reached a critical point, and suddenly opened his eyes. However, his originally round pupils had turned into a pair of cold vertical pupils. Winter has arrived, and everything is withering. Ice Dragon Sage mode at the moment, when the natural energy was completely balanced with the vitality and spiritual power in his body. Blue eyeshadow appeared on his eyelids and spread down along the corners of his eyes and nose wings, forming a blue face. On the top of his head, there was a pair of blue sharp horns sticking out, which was the symbol of the dragon, and also the symbol of him being a sage. Because the sage of the Raichi cave is a dragon. Except for the sporadic alienated snake scales behind his ears that have not faded, his sage mode has become more and more perfect. Hey, that guy's breath is too exaggerated. Bei was desperate and amazed at the figure in the sky. What did you sense? Obito and Kakuzu asked together. They could not sense natural energy, and after Qishuang entered the sage state, the chakra in his body was mixed with natural energy, and his aura became more obscure and elusive. They could not judge the other party's strength at this time by the aura. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473 Fear. Black Zetsu said solemnly, with the increase of natural energy, the strength of that boy's breath has increased by more than 100 times. If before using the immortal technique, his breath was like a bright star in my perception, now, he is like a bright moon in my perception. He exudes an extremely terrifying immortal breath all over his body, not much different from the woman on the other side. As he said this, he glanced at Shines and Shenji, who was also suspended in the air, not far from Qishuang. Hearing this, Kakuzu and the others were slightly stunned, and then they realized that the woman was also a powerful immortal. No wonder the other party has the ability to fly, and makes them unable to grasp the breath. Now, how does he compare to the person who saved me? After a long silence, Obito looked at the white figure in the sky and asked seriously. Black Zetsu thought for a moment and replied solemnly, in terms of aura, that kid is still a little bit behind that guy, but he is definitely not the opponent you want to meet. Kakuzu frowned and said, you mean, we are no match for him at all? Before Black Zetsu could reply, White Zetsu laughed heartlessly, comparing the aura strength of the three of you, the two of you combined, have no chance of winning. But you also know that a battle is not about who has the stronger aura and who can kill the other. You can't beat him, and it will be difficult for him to kill you. Kakuzu has 5 hearts and 5 lives, 4 more lives than others, so it is not so easy for him to die. Uchiha Obito has the ability to hollow out his right eye. As long as he doesn't do anything stupid, even if Hashirama Senju is resurrected, he can't do anything to him. Seeing the two of them were silent, Black Zetsu continued, that kid has amazing intelligence capabilities, and with the power of the sage state, he can pose a fatal threat to us. If we are not careful, it will lead to unpredictable consequences. I suggest giving up the plan to capture the 6-tailed beast this time, and it will be safer to take the 3-tailed beast away from Kirigakure in advance. Obito thought for a while, and ordered Kakuzu, you take the 3-tailed beast away first, and I will stay in Kirigakure to observe for a while to see if there is a chance to take the 6-tailed beast away. White Zetsu, let your clone lead Kakuzu, and when the things over there are done, let him hand the 3-tailed beast over to Kakuzu. As he said that, he gave White Zetsu another order. No problem. White Zetsu waved his hand, and immediately summoned the nearest clone through telepathy. In the sky, Nana Frost, who had just opened his eyes and entered the sage state, immediately locked onto the very conspicuous 6-tailed beast on the ground. With the increase of natural energy, his 5 senses were greatly improved, and his chakra perception ability was improved by more than 100 times, which was not much worse than those professional perception ninjas. In addition to the giant beast raging not far away, he also sensed Obito and his group hiding in the corner, quietly observing him. But there were priorities. He had no time to entangle with them, and just wanted to suppress the six-tailed beast as soon as possible to reduce the casualties on the battlefield. Then, his figure flashed like a cannonball and shot straight at the giant beast on the ground from the sky. Because absorbing natural energy requires concentration and entering a state of selflessness, you can't be distracted, otherwise there will be accidents. So he doesn't know how long it takes for him to accumulate natural energy. Now, he can only rush to the battlefield as quickly as possible and suppress the crazy and rampaging six-tailed beast in the shortest time to make up for the time wasted just now. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh. If I were also born with the body of a sage, I wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. The first condition for the caster to enter the state of sagehood is to accumulate the natural energy in the body to a certain critical point. Only when all the chakras representing life force and spiritual force are in a new balance with natural energy, can the whole person's life be sublimated and become a sage. Although as a sage, even when he does not use sage techniques, there is still some natural energy in his body, but only a little natural energy is not enough to make all his chakras balance with it and enter the sage state. The process of absorbing and accumulating natural energy earlier was to make up for the lack of natural energy. However, because everyone is born different and has different physiques, even among sages, the amount of natural energy that can be absorbed and stored is different. If the critical point of natural energy entering the sage state is set at 30% of the total energy of the caster, then the total amount of natural energy in Nanda Frost's body in normal state is only about 5%. But if the first generation Hokage Senju Hashirama and JGO are born with sage bodies, because of their special physiques, when they are not in the sage state, their bodies will spontaneously absorb and store a large amount of natural energy. The natural energy in their bodies is always maintained at 29.99%, infinitely close to the critical point. When fighting, they only need to absorb a little natural energy to enter the sage state immediately. They don't need to spend time to accumulate energy like non-sage sages like Nanashi. Even if the sage power is exhausted and they exit the sage state, they don't need to stop and accumulate natural energy. Because of the advantages of the natural sage body, they can passively absorb and accumulate natural energy while continuing to fight. They can enter the sage state again when the time is up. It is really convenient to the extreme. Nanashi can't help but feel jealous. On the ground, led by main jet Sakizuki, a group of Jonins led the Vulpix to an area with relatively few people. Although he used the violent danger steaming power to break the Vulpix's delusion of using the tailed beast ball several times, and with the assistance of the other Miss Ninja Kiryu, which limited its bubble chakra attack method, the huge size of the Vulpix itself was a hurdle they could not cross anyway. The mountain-like size represents the terrifying basic power and huge attack range. With a flick of the long tail, a tall building could be easily knocked down, leaving many Miss Ninjas with no way to avoid or block it. Manayu himself was fine, relying on the water transformation technique. The attacks of the Vulpix's body could not pose a fatal threat to him, but the other Miss Ninjas were in a miserable state. If they were hit, they would die, and if they were touched, they would be injured. In just a short while, more than half of the Miss Ninjas who were responsible for helping to contain the Vulpix were gone. Although there were still Miss Ninjas who came to help one after another, they were still no match for the Vulpix's fast killing speed. The total number of Miss Ninjas responsible for containing the Vulpix was decreasing. Boom. After detonating the clone again, Manayu took the opportunity to retreat, gasping for breath. Huff, huff, huff. In the battle for the Mizukage that year, his body was injured, and he could not fight for a long time. Now, he has used the Vulpix steaming power which consumes a lot of chakra continuously, and his body is on the verge of limit. If he continues to fight with the Vulpix, he will really have to risk his life to delay time. Well, now you understand how troublesome it is to use the Sage mode. Of course, this is my own setting, and everyone has different opinions. In addition, this book has exceeded 1 million words, so I will leave a footprint as a commemoration. 2019.9.28. Chapter 474 Arrival. What's worse is that, although the burst danger steaming power is very lethal to ninjas, it has limited effect on guys like the tailed beasts with thick skin and flesh. After using the water and oil clones to bomb several times, it only caused some flesh wounds to the six-tailed beast, making it unable to ignore its attacks and achieve the purpose of containment, which is far from what Manzuki himself expected. Manzuki-sama, are you okay? Seeing him gasping for breath, a mist ninja who had just come to support him came up to him and asked with concern. Manu waved his hand, breathlessly saying, "How are the wounded? How are the wounded being evacuated?" The visitor shook his head and said seriously, "There are too many wounded, and many are even buried in the ruins and can't get out. It's impossible to evacuate them all in a short time." At this point, he looked back at the rampaging beast, gritted his teeth, and whispered, "My lord, your health is not good. Why don't you retreat and rest first, and leave this place to us for the time being?" As a member of the Hazuki faction, he naturally didn't want to see Hazuki Manu die of exhaustion in this battle with the Vulpix. Hazuki Manu shook his head and sighed. "Without me, you can't even interrupt its accumulation of the tailed beast ball. The destructive power of the tailed beast ball is too terrible, and any shot can kill all the Jonin present. But among this group of people, except him, no one has the strength to interrupt the accumulation of the Vulpix. If he leaves, this group of people may not last for 10 minutes. Then, he took out a scroll from his pocket with a slight tremor. He opened the scroll and reluctantly made a few seals. With white smoke rising, a large sword embedded with a scroll appeared in front of him. It was the exploding sword Fimo. Looking at the giant beast that swept through the mist ninjas with its huge body, Manu continued, "I don't have much chakra left. My clone can only explode once more at most." As he spoke, his water oil clone fell from the sky and stood quietly beside him without moving. "If by that time, there are no strong enough reinforcement, I can only use this Fimo to try one last time and see if I can severely injure it. As for the rest, it all depends on you." At the end, even Manu's tone became pessimistic. Even if the Vulpix was really severely injured by him, it was not an opponent that this group of mist ninjas could deal with. At this moment, the Vulpix that had blown away the surrounding mist ninjas stopped moving again, opened its mouth wide, quickly gathered chakra, and compressed it into a ball in front of its mouth. "Oh no, that beast is about to release the tailed beast ball again." Maingetsu Hazuki exclaimed, and immediately cheered up, commanding his clones to rush forward. The clones grew in the wind, and when they rushed to the front of the Vulpix, they were already as big as a whole building. Seeing this, the besieging mist ninjas retreated tacitly to avoid being accidentally injured by the steam explosion. Boom. The Vulpix's tailed beast ball had not yet been fully accumulated, and was once again interrupted by Maingetsu's clones. But after this time, the Vulpix was excited to find that the clone that was supposed to shrink and recover had disappeared. "Hahaha, kid from the Hazuki family, your chakra is exhausted. This time, I see how you can stop me." The Vulpix Rhino immediately guessed the reason. After laughing wantonly, it ignored the mist ninjas who surrounded it again and opened its mouth wide again. Then, in the horrified eyes of everyone, another black and purple chakra energy ball slowly grew in front of its mouth. "Oh no, that beast has seen through my true colors." Maingetsu was extremely anxious. Although he had prepared a plan to severely injure the Vulpix with FEMO, a large number of detonating tags would be needed to severely injure such a huge beast as big as a small mountain. Even if FEMO had the ability to create detonating tags, it could not create them all at once in such a short time. "Everyone, hide," he shouted to the mist ninjas. The people who thought that the Vulpix was deliberately threatening everyone and were still waiting for Maingetsu to interrupt its accumulation process again, scattered in panic after hearing this anxious voice, hoping to avoid the explosion of the tailed beast ball that followed. "This tailed beast ball will be given to that damned little Maingetsu." Not forgetting that he was blown to dust by the steam just now, the Vulpix Rhino kept muttering in his heart while locking Maingetsu with chakra perception. "Oh no, that beast is targeting me." The fleeing Manzuki suddenly felt a surge of malice and immediately realized that it was because of the Vulpix. Am I going to die here? At this moment, he couldn't help but have a pessimistic thought. Even if his body was intact, he didn't dare to take a single-tailed beast ball. What's more, his chakra was almost exhausted, and he couldn't resist such an attack. Go to hell, damned little Hazuki. Just as the tailed beast ball was fully accumulated, and the Vulpix was cursing in his heart, a stream of white light shot down from the sky, and aimed directly at the back of its head. What? Sensing a terrifying breath approaching rapidly, the Vulpix was startled. However, before it could come to its senses, a huge force had already landed on its head. Boom. The dull and clear sound of the collision resounded throughout the battlefield, and even the screams of fear from the crowd were completely suppressed. Boom. Then, in front of the surprised eyes of the Mist Ninjas, the Vulpix was knocked to the ground by a stream of white light. The terrifying impact force collapsed the ground within a radius of nearly 100 meters. However, the matter did not end there, because the tailed beast jade that Vulpix had just accumulated had not yet been projected. Boom. The familiar explosion sounded immediately afterwards, and a small red sun emerged from the ground. The dazzling light was even inferior to the sun in the sky. In just a moment, the earth cracked, as if it was the end of the world, and the area within a radius of nearly 1000 meters was completely turned into ashes. However, because the explosion was centered on the position of the Vulpix, and everyone was running away, except for a few unlucky people who ran slower at the edge, most people escaped. It was just a pity for the Vulpix, who was hit head on by his own tailed beast jade, which was extremely unlucky. Compared with the tailed beast jade, the explosion clone of the little ghost of the ghost was simply a small witch compared to the big witch. Both the impact force and the high temperature generated by the explosion far exceeded that of a steam explosion. Even if it was hit head on, it was still a bit overwhelmed. Along with the scorching heat, the huge impact force generated by the explosion was like a volcanic eruption, and it immediately sprayed it into the sky. What just happened? A confused Mist Ninja asked his companion. I didn't see it clearly, I just saw a beam of white light flash by, and the Vulpix was knocked to the ground. The companion stared blankly at the giant beast that began to fall in the sky, swallowed his saliva and said. He was terrified. Chapter 475 Confidence. The impact of the explosion came quickly, and went away quickly. When the Vulpix stopped rising with the explosion, the huge body fell heavily to the ground like a meteor from outer space, with endless power. Boom. The earth trembled, as if a heavy hammer hit the surface of a drum, and the ground, which had finally calmed down, shook again. But this time, it was obviously not as strong as the explosion of the tailed beast ball just now. Who is that? Someone exclaimed. It was not until the Vulpix fell that he saw a white figure on the head of the giant beast. I don't know. I haven't seen it. The Mist Ninjas shook their heads. Only Manzuki Kizuki changed his expression slightly when he saw the familiar figure and subconsciously uttered a name. Nanami. It was Nanami who launched a surprise attack from the sky, knocked down the Vulpix, and stopped the rhino from throwing the tailed beast ball. Although his basic strength is not as strong as Kikuzu's, let alone a giant like Rhino, but after being baptized by the seeds of immortal arts, his body, which has been tempered and strengthened by natural energy, is much stronger than most ninjas. However, he is not good at physical arts, so in ordinary battles, his strength advantage is not obvious. Now, after entering the immortal state, his whole body's strength, speed, recovery, defense, perception, have been improved by more than 100 times, and he can completely wrestle with giants like Mangsh. This Vulpix, which is the same size as Mangsh, has no special strength, so its own strength is naturally not much different from him. Taking advantage of the momentum of falling from a high altitude, he knocked it to the ground without any surprise. If it were on flat ground, there would definitely be no such effect. Fortunately, he arrived in time. If he was half a beat slower, the tailed beast ball might have been thrown out by the Vulpix. At that time, I don't know how many people will die. Although he saved everyone and put himself in the center of the explosion of the tailed beast ball, he did not suffer any damage. Because of the huge body of Vulpix, it was considerate enough to block all the impact of the explosion, and the aftermath was completely ignored by him in the state of sage transformation. However, the Vulpix under his feet felt differently. Being hit by a tailed beast ball at such a close distance, it felt like being thrown into magma and washed, and its whole body seemed to be scalded. As for the impact of the explosion, it was completely forgotten. Because its body is shaped like a slug or a mollusk, its body is very flexible and is best at resisting impact. In general, except for some serious burns from high temperature, the impact of the explosion only caused some minor injuries to it. Who are you? As soon as it landed, it roared angrily and immediately threw the uninvited guest above its head away. Me. Standing firmly on the ground, Qishuang slowly said to him, I'm just a Kirigakure ninja. You can call me Qishuang. Then he stretched out 2 fingers and continued, now, I will give you 2 choices. Either stand still and wait for follow-up treatment, or I will knock you to the ground and wait for follow-up treatment. Which one are you going to choose? Hearing this, both the Vulpix present and the Kirigakure ninjas outside were stunned for a moment. These 2 choices seemed to be no different. More importantly, the guy who introduced himself as Qishuang was too conceited, so conceited that it made people feel a little arrogant. That guy's tone is too big. He actually wants to suppress the Vulpix by himself. A Kirigakure ninja whispered to his companion. Anyway, let's see first. Judging from the attack just now, he is definitely not a weakling. But, I have never heard of such a strong man in the village. The companion's face changed, first surprised, then confused. The Miss Ninjas had similar thoughts and discussed privately. On the other side, Mainjetsu Kizuki was in a very bad mood after hearing this. He had seen Nana Frost's strength. It was indeed a very difficult opponent, but it was not to the point that he felt helpless and unable to suppress the tailed beast. However, after seeing the terrifying attack just now, he realized that the opponent had been holding back and had not used his full strength. The opponent's seemingly arrogant words were definitely not a joke. That meant that their Kizuki family was facing a terrifying strong man who could suppress the tailed beast by himself. A strong man who could control the situation of the battle. No wonder the opponent said some inexplicable and irrelevant words to him before the battle. It turned out that this was the confidence. On the battlefield, the Vulpix laughed angrily. Hehe, little devil, I won't choose any of them. I will grind you into a pulp. After saying that, it suppressed the pain caused by the burns from the tailed beast jade, twisted its body slightly, and immediately raised its 6 tails as thick as ancient trees, aiming at Qishuang and fanning them. If you don't accept my toast, you will be punished. Then it's not my fault. Qishuang's face turned stern, and he immediately retreated, flipping his fingers quickly in his hands, forming seals to prepare for the spell. Boom. The 6 giant tails swept, and the area of nearly 100 meters collapsed immediately, smashing the already desertified surface into pieces again. Although the 6-tailed attack coverage is very large, Qishuang's speed, strength and other abilities have been greatly improved after entering the state of immortality, so he easily avoided this attack that ordinary people can hardly avoid. At the same time, his spell was also ready to be completed. Senjutsu Ice Release 8 Forbidden Godlocks. He suddenly pressed his right palm, which had accumulated Senjutsu Chakra, on the ground, and then injected Senjutsu Chakra into the ground. Everyone felt that the ground beneath their feet began to shake again. It seemed that something was moving underground, eager to drill out of the ground. Boom boom boom. With the sound of explosions, 8 blue water columns broke through the ground and immediately surrounded the 6-tailed beast in the center. It was not until then that the Miss Ninjas suddenly realized that the thing that was moving underground just now was the surging underground water veins. Qishuang forcibly led the nearby underground water veins here. How can a few underground water veins suppress the 6-tailed beast? Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but start thinking again. Soon, their doubts were answered. The 8 water columns condensed into ice and turned into 8 chains with cold smoke curling up, shooting out from 8 different angles. Because it was too big to dodge and the opponent cast the spell too quickly, it had no time to deal with it. By the time Liu Wei came to its senses, the 8 cold chains had already fallen on it, binding it tightly. Retract. With a light shout, under the control of Qishuang, the 8 cold chains suddenly retracted to the 8 water vein sources. Boom. The 8 cold chains each pulled a part of Liuo's body back, and in just a moment, the chains were tightened, pressing Liuo to the ground. The name Forbidden God is not called for nothing. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.